always get what I want in the end. He breathed a laugh. I'm not weak. Dana leaned up so that he could feel her breath on his face. Prove it, she whispered. Brandine's lips met hers. A second later, he felt her tongue poke through his parted lips and he returned the favor, basking in the moment and wishing it wouldn't have to end. But he wasn't going to let it go to waste. He was going to make the best of every second he had. Chapter 5, Raw Emotions. Chapter text. Come on, Mara. No. I'm fine and everyone's going to be free, so why not? Hiccup, you had surgery. Astrid suppressed a smirk at her husband's constant begging. She supported him, of course, but watching him trying to argue his case with the healer was bringing her much-needed entertainment. Mara would relent, she always did, but watching her fight Hiccup on this was too much fun after the craziness of the last week or so. I'm not exerting myself too much. Hiccup was griping. You said yourself that I was right as rain. Those were the exact words you used, Mara. Right as rain. Not to go dragon racing. Mara shot back. All the guys are doing it. Mara crossed her arms. And if all the guys were jumping off the bridge to the arena, would you do it too? Depends, are there dragons to catch us? Hiccup. Astrid spotted a smile on Mara's face that she was desperately trying to keep down. Hiccup was clearly enjoying himself. The healer tossed a roll of gauze at him as an attempt to distract him from noticing her amusement. Wait, he whined. I've jumped off that bridge a few times in my crazy youth, it's not so bad when Toothless is there. You're hopeless. Mara shook her head, finally allowing herself to smile. Well fine, but if you die, I hope Finn is ready to take on your job. He's not allowed until he's 17. Hiccup waggled his finger in front of Mara annoyingly. Or have you forgotten how old he is? You're in a weird mood today. Mara said as she finished changing his bandage. Eat some strange clams or something. You're a strange clam. Mara smacked him with her blanket, making him laugh. Hooligan women are so violent. Hiccup rolled his eyes. I guess they gotta be to deal with a crazy man like me as their supreme ruler. Thor have mercy. Astrid snorted. The day you become supreme ruler is the day the world ends. Hey now. Hiccup flashed her a cheesy grin. I'm your supreme ruler. He paused. Wait, that came out wrong. Did you hit your head during that last dragon race? Mara felt his forehead. Nah, I'm just messing with my two favorite protectors. Hiccup smiled fondly at them. But seriously, I am fine. I think I can handle a dragon race. Well, if you end up injuring yourself, I will constantly remind you of it until one of us dies. Mara patted his head and threw the excess rolls of gauze into her bag. I guess you can go do your supreme ruler things. That I shall. Hiccup stood up and waved. Thanks a million, Mara. No problem, but I'm charging extra for sarcasm next time. Mara called. Astrid put an arm around his waist as she led Hiccup out. If everyone actually included a sarcasm charge, we haddocks would be broke within an hour between the four of us. You know it. Hiccup put his arm around her shoulders and kissed her temple. But hey, I got my dragon race. I can now make up for my tragic loss last time. Tragic, huh? Astrid narrowed her eyes at him. It was a haddock victory, wasn't it? Yes, but it wasn't my haddock victory. Hiccup nudged her with his hip. That's all that matters, you know. You're so modest. Astrid smirked. Maybe Finn or Snotlout will let you win this time. Oh come on, I could sweep the floor with those two. Hiccup said, finally coming to the place he and Astrid had to part ways. And when I win, I want yak steak. We'll see. Astrid waved him off. With mashed potatoes and gravy in the shape of a smiley face. Hiccup called as he walked away. Dream on, haddock. Astrid stuck her tongue out at him before turning away, snickering to herself. She turned and nearly ran headlong into Eric, who was clearly not paying attention to where he was going. Watch yourself, Larson. Astrid gently grasped his shoulders and moved him sideways so her path was clear. Sorry. Eric flashed her an awkward smile. Lost in thought. Oh. Astrid paused and walked backward a few steps so she could really look at him. You okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Eric shook his head. Great, actually, just a little bored. I don't really have much to do today. Horst gave me the day off because we didn't have enough orders to justify keeping 3 people there. And Cliff's off gallivanting somewhere, collecting seashells at the beach or some such. Collecting seashells. Astrid raised an eyebrow. That's odd. It's for Annie's birthday present. He's making her earrings and he keeps saying he needs 2 perfect specimens for, and I quote, the greatest piece of jewelry she will ever feast her eyes on that will make others weep with joy when she wears them. Astrid laughed. He can't just say he wants them to look nice, can he? And miss out on the opportunity to be melodramatic. Eric shook his head with a smirk. Impossible. No kidding. Astrid smiled. Eric was a bit closer to Hiccup than her, what with them both being amputees, but she was fond of the boy and could tell that something wasn't quite right in those teal eyes of his. You sure you're okay? Eric sighed deeply. Maybe. I don't know. I kind of feel like you're not the best person to talk to about this subject. How come? Well, the subject is Annie. Eric winced as if expecting Astrid to shout at him. Seeing as I've known her for her entire life, I wouldn't rule me out just yet. Astrid patted Eric's back, leading him in the direction of a nearby bench. Don't you have stuff to do? In a bit, I have some time to kill. Besides, I always have time for my kids, biological or not. Astrid sat down and waited for Eric to sit down next to her. Did she say something? No. Eric shook his head. Well, it's kind of hard to put into words. Did she do something? Astrid felt a rising sense of unease. Her daughter had been a bit distant lately, which wasn't unusual for a teenage girl, but it was still a cause for concern. No. Not directly. Astrid felt her patience slipping away. Okay, Eric, I'm not Hiccup. I'm going to need a little more clarification. It's Brandine, okay? Eric blurted out. Astrid's eyebrows jumped. I don't like Brandine and I think she's crazy for staying with him when there are other guys who. I just don't think he appreciates her. Oh. Astrid didn't quite meet his eye. It wasn't that she didn't like or approve of Brandine, but something about him had always made her a bit uneasy. Maybe it was the fact that he and Adriana were such different people and yet he somehow still wanted to be with her. Maybe it was just how quickly they'd jumped into a relationship once he moved to Burke. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. Perhaps Eric could shed some light on the subject. What are you seeing? All right. Eric paused to take a breath, finally settling on the bench beside her. He seemed to have a lot on his mind. Well, you know how Annie's really funny. And goofy. Not that she's smiling all the time, but when she is, she's just. I don't know, her. She's comfortable in her own skin. Astrid nodded. Exactly. Eric exclaimed. I don't see that with when she's with Brandine. It's like she has to act a certain way to fit in. She did that with the popular girls before he came, but it seemed to get worse when they started dating. I guess I like her better when she isn't trying. When she's her. Astrid pondered this for a moment. It wasn't like she made it a habit to check in on her daughter every time she sat with Brandine's preferred group, but she certainly noticed how happy Adriana was when she was with Taryn or Cliff. Even Eric brought out that bright smile. But was it really her place to make decisions like that in place of her daughter? I don't know, I wouldn't say she's completely faking her identity. Astrid commented. She does like him a lot. She makes an effort to make him happy. Eric made a face, like the idea made him want to vomit. She could be more comfortable though. She doesn't hold back with me or Cliff. I see what you're saying, but honestly, it's her decision who she spends her time with. Astrid shrugged. I don't see it happening yet, but if she someday decides she doesn't like what she sees, she'll make her decision. She's a strong girl, Eric. A lot more than people give her credit for. I know she is. Astrid spotted a faraway look in the boy's eyes and she stifled a smile. She'd seen that look on Finn's face when he saw a pretty girl. Eric continued speaking, but she's also insecure. Astrid nodded once. She is. And maybe that has something to do with it. Eric frowned, staring at his knees. I'm probably being paranoid, but we've been friends for a really long time, so I care about her. I think you care about her a little too much. Astrid nudged him. Eric, you can open up about what you're feeling. I'm not going to tell Audrey if you don't want me to. So, do you have feelings for her? Eric turned his head away from her. I'm not sure I want to talk about this. I think you just answered my question. Well, how can I not? Eric blurted out. She's funny and she's so smart and pretty. Pretty smart, that is. The young man suddenly blushed, but glowed on without realizing he'd said the same thing twice. Astrid fought the grin merging onto her face. We've known each other for years. I know her better than some people know their siblings, heck, probably better than Finn knows her. He waved his hands around in a way that reminded Astrid of how Hiccup tended to talk while emotional. I know I'm not really all that much of a catch and we've had to kind of restart. But we've had no rifts in our friendship in a while, and all those feelings from that snuggle talk when we kissed just came back with reinforcements. Astrid thought she would feel uncomfortable listening to a boy describe his feelings for her daughter. She wasn't Hiccup, but she did feel a strong urge to protect Adriana from harm, as any mother should. But Eric was different. The way he spoke about her wasn't the way Finn used to talk about Helga or how Snotlout would talk about any girl that caught his eye back when they were teenagers. It was more like the sparkle in Hiccup's eye when he spotted her across the room, the way his face lit up as she approached. Almost like he felt unworthy to call himself her husband. And perhaps Eric felt the same unworthiness. Eric, honey. Astrid weighed her words carefully. Audrey is almost 17. She's certainly not thinking about marriage or children or a little house with a picket fence right now. Those things will come, as much as Hiccup denies it. Teens make decisions, some of them stupid. I seem to remember that you were going through a lot at her age. Her eyes flitted to Eric's arms, which were covered by his sleeves. She saw the boy fidget a bit. The scars from his cutting were faded, but they were still visible if she knew where to look. If Brandine isn't the right guy, the relationship will end. Who knows? Maybe she'll give you a chance next. I don't see any end in sight. Eric mumbled. Oh, you never know what'll set them off. Sometimes a couple is fine one minute and broken up the next. Believe me, I know. She wasn't about to get into the sordid tale of her and Hiccup's near divorce, but she sensed that Eric already knew she was thinking about it. Just wait it out. We'll see what happens. Yeah. Eric agreed. You're not going to tell her about this, are you? No. Astrid let out a small laugh and gave him a side hug. Audrey can wait until you're ready to tell her what you feel. Okay if I tell Hiccup though. If you think it'll help. Eric shrugged. But not Finn. Oh no. Astrid squeezed his shoulder. Definitely not. She paused for a second, thinking carefully. You know, I think Audrey has the day off today too. Brandine's at the forge until late. Gobber got a ton of orders from the hunters. You should invite her to do something. As friends. For old time's sake. You think so? Absolutely. Seriously, she'll be bored out of her mind. I'm pretty sure she's in the library seeking out a book she hasn't read 5 times. Astrid patted his back. Go, sweep her off her feet. You know what? I will. Eric stood up, a determined expression on his face. Thanks, Astrid. You're very welcome. You're welcome to stay for dinner, though I doubt you'll want to. It's Hiccup's night to cook. Eric made a face. Hiccup was a man of many talents, but cooking was not one of them. But both Astrid and Finn had made up their minds that he should learn to do more than the simple things Stoic had taught him. I guess I'll wing it. See what Annie wants to do. See you later. Bye. Astrid watched the young man go from the bench, an extra bounce in his step that wasn't hindered by his stump. She finally stood and made her way toward the village square, pondering their conversation as she went. Just as she turned the corner and reached the bustling crowd, a thought struck her. What if Eric's concern didn't lie with Adriana at all? What if his real worry was with Brandine? Astrid sighed in frustration, wishing she'd thought to ask what specifically he didn't like about Brandine. The boy very clearly cared about her daughter, and the problems he'd mentioned concerning her were very normal concerns. Of course, the Larson boy could merely be jealous of Brandine, which would also be normal. But Eric was smart and could see right through most problems. He thought hard about things before speaking up, just like a strategist would. This is why Hiccup valued his opinion, even though he wasn't even on the council. After a mere day of joining Finn's old gang and turning the tables in such a short amount of time, it became very obvious that Eric could be a valuable asset. So, if there was any serious problem at all, what was he seeing? And better yet, should she and Hiccup be concerned? She sorely hoped not. Eric finally reached the library and stepped inside, happy to have a respite from the sun's heat. The smell of old, leather-bound books filled his nose and he sighed contentedly. He always forgot how much he enjoyed the smell. He walked among the rows of bookshelves in search for his fellow blonde friend. At long last, he found her seated at a table with her back toward him, a large pile of books beside her. Matilda sat at her desk beyond the table and looked up in surprise when he silently walked in. Eric swept a finger to his lips and crept up behind the unsuspecting Haddock girl. Stifling a grin, he reached around and covered her eyes with his hands, nearly laughing when she squealed in surprise. "Oh boy!" Adriana straightened and rested her hands across his fingers, carefully feeling his skin to identify him. Because Matilda was watching with an amused grin, Eric had to fight the blush threatening to cover his face. There wasn't anything romantic in her touch, so why was he acting like a fool? Adriana mused, her hands sliding up his wrists. Eric bit his lip anxiously, trying not to fidget. "Not beast hands, so not Finn." "Matilda, yeah or nay?" Matilda giggled beneath her hand. "Oh, I'm not saying." "Tell me yeah." Adriana whined. She felt Eric's hands again. "Okay. I'm going to state the obvious, Brandine." Eric felt a pang. He frowned at her, almost giving himself away with an adamant no. Matilda gave him a sympathetic smile. "No." "Okay." Adriana said. "Cliff wouldn't be able to stay quiet this long, so that only leaves one person." "Wait, no, two. Is it my dad?" Eric deflated, his hands slipping down her eyes a little. "Really?" Adriana slapped his arms down. "What? I saved the best for last." Aha! Eric gave her a mocking frown before plopping in a chair a few feet away from her and snatched a book off the pile. He promptly stuffed his face inside the pages. "Oh come on, don't be like that. I'm so high on your list of favorites." "Excuse me for being mopey." Eric scowled. "Now if you'll excuse me, I need time to lick my wounds." "Get your butt over here. It will take less time if I lick 'em." Eric fought the smirk rising to his face, especially when Matilda burst into laughter. He grappled for a snappy comeback. "No, that's just extremely awkward." Adriana grinned. "Hey, that one's on you." "Yeah, well, you had to go and make it awkward." "Only awkward if you make it awkward." Eric shook his head, ignoring all the thoughts running through his mind, not deeming any of them appropriate given the current situation. This was a landfill of traps that he'd surely regret later if he wasn't careful. "I'm taking an oath of silence." "Shut up and read your book, Haddock." "Fine." "Quiet game," Adriana challenged. "Let's see who can mope the longest." "Sure." Adriana promptly turned to her book. Eric stole a quick glance at her out the corner of his eye, quickly turning back when he saw her eyes leave the page. He forced his expression to go numb and careless. But inside his stomach was tying in knots. Was he just flirting with her? Did all that qualify as flirting? Would Brandine be punching his lights out right now if he'd been here? Or would the guys be teasing him relentlessly? Nervously, he glanced up at Matilda. The woman sat there with a serene smile on her face as she watched the young people, clearly ignoring her paperwork in fear of missing something. She caught Eric's eye and winked, causing him to duck his head back down and fight a blush once more. This had been a running thing with them since they were little kids. The quiet game would be played for hours in the library. They'd eat up books and Matilda would eventually ask a question, but would be promptly ignored. Not out of rudeness of course, but out of the stubbornness of the child dying to win. They still weren't sure who was the crowned victor. Eventually they'd be found by their parents and their silent spells would be broken. But even as young adults they'd fall into the same routine as if nothing had changed. A lot had changed for sure. Eric kept rereading the same lines, trying to immerse himself into the pages but found he couldn't concentrate. His thoughts kept straying to Adriana. Carefully he lifted his eyes to look at her once more. Her hair was half down today, cascading off her shoulders in waves from a previous braid. A few bobby pins kept the shorter layers tied at the back of her head. He didn't know why, but the older he got the more he loved her hair. There would come a time when Brandine made a comment to her about cutting her hair and he thought he might internally combust, almost like someone had asked him to cut off his fingers. He simply couldn't imagine life without it and it just made sense for it to be there. He had 5 fingers on each hand. Adriana had long, beautiful hair. That's simply how it was meant to be and screw anyone, especially Brandine, who might think otherwise. Adriana suddenly turned her eyes toward him. Eric's eyes darted back to the book. He fought another blush, embarrassed. Was he too obvious? She couldn't seriously be oblivious to just how crazy she made him feel every day. Everyone else saw it. Heck, even Brandine saw it. So why didn't she? Eric's heart plunked down to his shoe. Maybe she did see it and it just wasn't meant to be. They'd been friends since they were little kids. Maybe she saw him as a brother, like Cliff. Maybe the idea of having any romantic interest in him repulsed her. He didn't know. Suddenly he didn't want to know. If it came down to that, he'd be so completely crushed, he didn't know what he'd do. How could he get over someone he'd loved for most of his life? Eric was so engrossed in his thoughts, he didn't notice anything out of place. That is, until something snapped him in the face right below his right eye. Ow! He pulled back and stared at the rubber band lying on the table. Adriana pumped her fists in the air. I win. Eric glared at her, rubbing his cheekbone. Did not. I so did. You cheated. There is no cheating. If you remember, we decided that there was to be no interfering. No tickling, no stupid faces or eye contact or throwing books at people to make them lose. Eric argued, ignoring her gorgeous grin. The roof. We said the roof would fall down and we still couldn't sacrifice the win. Rules change, Larson. Adriana sniffed. Time to leave the past in the past. Rules are important and are vital to society. Adriana shook her head back and forth. Well, I'ma take your rules and stick 'em where the sun don't shine. Eric gaped, ignoring Matilda's guffawed laughter. No. You can't just stick nothing where the sun don't shine because the sun shines everywhere. Adriana cupped her chin in her hands innocently. Except at night. Eric huffed. Except your face. Adriana gasped and slapped his arm. Finally, Eric allowed himself to grin. He held up his palms when she sputtered. Desperate times call for desperate measures. More like you just don't like to lose. Eric leaned forward. Do you like to lose? I wouldn't sacrifice your face on it. Sitting back in his seat, Eric snorted. Nothing special about my face. Adriana frowned. Everybody's face is special. Wow, now I fit into the general blah demographic of just people. Thanks. Eric drawled. The girl rolled her eyes and made a face at Matilda. Some people just can't be happy. Eric leaned back in his chair, hands cupping the back of his head. Some people just can't G. He launched forward to keep from falling backwards when Adriana pushed his leg back further, threatening to topple him. Once he was fully on the floor again, he glared at her. Adriana's unrestrained laughter echoed through the library. Eric fought his emotions, drinking in the sound and forcing the glare. You should have seen your face. Why would you do that? I could have died. Adriana wiped her eyes. Oh my gods, that was the single most best choice I've ever made in my life. Single most best choice, eh? Eric whistled. Matilda, we need to look under the G section for a book on grammar. Stop it. Adriana slapped his arm. Stop hurting me. Stop sassing me. Oh gods, stop killing me with all this cute. Matilda gushed from her desk. Eric instantly pulled back. Yup. Definitely flirting. He awkwardly scratched his neck, suddenly feeling very uncomfortable and exposed and afraid to look his friend in the eye. Adriana cleared her throat. Want to take a walk? Walk. Sure. Yeah, walking is good. Eric bumbled as he stood, pushing his chair in and generally avoiding eye contact. Matilda chuckled as the two teenagers walked toward the door. Have fun. Eric marched after Adriana, muttering "be cool" under his breath. What? Adriana asked curiously. Nothing. Eric stepped around her and pulled the door open, waving her forward. The girl ducked her head in a sheepish smile before stepping outside. Eric bit his lip and exhaled slowly before following, not sure what exactly he was doing and hoping he wasn't doing anything stupid he'd regret later. Adriana hadn't felt so lightweight and carefree in a long time. There wasn't any particular reason for that, she loved her life and things seemed to be going well across the board. But Eric's random appearance at the library had spurned a sense of ease and comfort that she hadn't felt in a long time. Spending time with him alone was refreshing. The blonde duo moseyed through the streets at an aimless pace, talking about every random thing that came to mind. Brandine told her ages ago that she talked too fast, too much, and jumped from topic to topic way too easily. Apparently it was annoying and hard to follow her train of thought. She'd had to work on her lack of focus for his sake. Eric never missed a beat. He shifted conversation easily, his go-with-the-flow, carefree personality melded with hers so perfectly that the random spurts of conversation or bouts of excitement didn't faze him in the least. She wondered if that was due to their 12-year-old friendship. They knew each other better than most people after all. Along the way, Adriana noticed something else. She'd always been known to not pay attention where she was walking as she talked. She couldn't multitask in its basest form apparently. With Eric at her side though, she found she was running into things a lot less. Apparently Eric would gently touch her arm or back and steer her in a general direction while she talked to avoid any oncoming collisions with people or dragons or barrels or boxes or whatever. He never interrupted, he never made a big deal of it. He simply did it. Brandine had called her a klutz a fair few times, and not always in a teasing way. Eric had been calling her a dork early on in their lives and to this day, he still would mutter the word under his breath with a twinkle in his eye. It was at times like these that Adriana didn't know what to think about her best friend. So I said to her that we need to make sure to let the kids play outside sometimes too because children need to get some sunlight. No children should be stuck indoors all the time, I mean it's just good for them to get some fresh air. Adriana ranted. Yeah, Eric nodded in agreement. It took some prodding but eventually they allowed me to start taking their kids outside. They still have to wear their hats and bonnets, which is fine, we can negotiate on it just fine, but it just seems silly that some people are so afraid of the outside. Adriana huffed. Eric snickered. It's like the time I took my niece and nephew outside to play and they started whining at me. He donned a childish expression and whined, "It's dirty out here. And windy. Why do we have to come out here, it's so yucky." Adriana burst into laughter. Why didn't you sweep the grass first? I don't like it. Why do we have to be out here? Stop. Stop. Adriana cried through her laughter. Eric cracked up beside her, bumping her with his shoulder playfully. She made a face up at him, but felt a strange excitement in her chest when she saw the dimples on his face. Gods, she adored his dimpled smile. Adriana faltered momentarily. Where had that thought come from? She thought further and realized, yes, she did love his dimpled smile. There was nothing wrong with that, was there? She'd known him for years and years, long before she'd met Brandine. So no. There was simply nothing wrong or irrational with loving her best friend's dimpled smile. Even if it did make her brain short-circuit a bit. Nothing wrong at all. You're such a dork. Adriana said resolutely. You're dork. Eric smirked. Another pitter-patter in her chest, but still she nodded. Yes. Wait. Eric stopped a step in front of her. What? How did we end up out here? Eric looked around in surprise and she suspected she looked the same. They were in the middle of the woods. Huh? Eric turned to look back the way they'd come, which was overgrown with weeds and wildflowers and rotting trees that had fallen years before. Why is this familiar? Adriana asked, spinning in a circle. It's almost like. Eric gasped suddenly. Oh. Troll Bridge. Adriana's mouth fell open. Oh my, we totally left all civilization behind to visit our personal getaway. Eric smiled knowingly. Adriana hid a giddy smile. We haven't come out here in too long. Well, let's see what we can find. Eric turned and led the way through the overgrown weeds. Adriana followed him with an excited bounce in her step. They paused when they came across a rather large fallen tree in the center of their path. Oh. The girl frowned sadly. No worries. Eric reassured her, swinging his left leg over and hopping over. His prosthetic caught for a moment, making him almost stumble, but he quickly recovered and held out a hand to her. Adriana took his hand and carefully climbed over. Is it hard to walk in this terrain? Since you can't feel the ground? Eric winced. A little. Mostly because I can't tell if I'm caught on a weed or something. He reached down and yanked off a handful of clotted grass for emphasis. But on the roads I'm fine. Except on hills, Adriana teased. Hey, we agreed never to talk about that. Eric wagged a finger at her and pressed on. Adriana giggled and followed after him. Soon enough they arrived. The woods opened up into a small clearing where an old wooden bridge led to a small cave. An even smaller creek slithered underneath the bridge, which was covered in a thick moss and broken twigs. Tall trees rose up around the clearing, fortifying their little rendezvous like a mystical fortress. Wow! Eric murmured. I thought it was a lot bigger. Adriana shrugged. We were a lot smaller then. She stepped forward, stepping over a path of mushrooms growing across the moss. She stared at the creek and the bridge and the cave, remembering all the fun games and adventures they'd had in their time here. Long summer days were spent here from dawn until dusk. They'd even built a few snow forts a couple times. A pang of nostalgia hit her square in the chest. Why did they have to grow up? Why had Eric lost his father so suddenly? Why had their friendship ended so quickly, harsh words exchanged and usual habits turned to memory? She was ever grateful that they'd been able to mend things. They'd started over and today was an obvious testament to how close they still were. How far they'd come and all they were willing to put aside to make their friendship more important. It was stronger now than it had been. But they'd still lost precious time. She couldn't help but feel like they'd missed out on something in that time. A brief romance had bugged that Snoggletog, right on his 15th birthday. But it had been snuffed out before it was given the chance to fully blossom. What are you thinking about? Eric asked softly. Adriana briefly considered sharing her thoughts. But then she thought of Brandine and cleared her head with a sigh. Nothing. She stepped forward, wanting to check out the cave for old time's sake. She stepped onto the bridge and marched forward, when the sound of rotten wood snapping caught her attention. Annie. Eric lunged forward and grabbed her waist just as her right foot slammed through the wood. Adriana yelped and clung onto his shoulders, trying to pull her leg out. It was stuck almost up to her calf muscle. Hold on. Hold on. Eric got a better grip on her waist and looked down. Does it hurt? No. Adriana sighed, annoyed with herself. I didn't even think about it. Nah, it's okay, we're good. Eric said. Hold still. He shifted his weight and placed his prosthetic on more of the rotten wood beside her leg. He braced himself and slammed the metal into the wood, breaking more off. Adriana wiggled her foot around before finally pulling it out of the hole. You shouldn't have done it that way. Your leg. Eric pulled her backwards toward the ground. I'm fine. Yeah, but you could have hurt yourself because of my stupid. Adriana froze when she looked up at him, realizing just how close they were standing. Eric still had his arms around her waist, her one arm still wrapped around his shoulder and the other resting on his chest. They were so close she could feel his breath on her face and his heartbeat under his shirt. He looked like a deer in torchlight. His eyes were full of nervousness, like he was afraid he was crossing a line, but they were also filled with something else. A look she couldn't identify. But the strange thing was, she wasn't uncomfortable with this. In fact, she didn't want to let go. They stared at each other for a few seconds. Eric's gaze suddenly softened, his eyes swept across her features in a way that made her heart pound. That's when she realized what the look was, longing. Eric reached up and skimmed his thumb against her cheek, brushing a stray lock of hair out of her face. Adriana's heart pounded when his gaze flickered to her lips, suddenly wondering if he was going to kiss her. She couldn't deny the warmth that spread through her at the thought. Then, he bit his lip and looked down at the ground. Eric released her and swallowed hard. "We should get back to the village." He said it so quiet she almost didn't hear through the haze in her brain. Eric turned to walk away but she caught his arm. "Wait." Eric froze, looking back at her. He didn't move closer. Adriana swallowed her fear and held his arm in both hands, playing with the fabric. She tried to gather her thoughts, suddenly unsure what to say. Her entire mind had filled with new emotions, some buried and locked away from years ago. "I should go," Eric whispered. Adriana looked up at him, hurt. "Why?" His teal eyes met hers. She was surprised at how dejected he suddenly looked. "Because you have a boyfriend." She blinked. "But..." "No." Eric gently pulled his arm away, looking at the creek instead of her. "There are no buts." Adriana suddenly felt very emotional. She wanted to figure this out. "Please don't hide from me." Eric looked up at her, emotions bared. He looked at her like it physically hurt him to do so. I know there's Brandine, but there's something here and I don't want to sweep it under the rug like it's nothing." Adriana stammered. "Your feelings are important too." "This isn't about me," Eric said quietly. "It's you." "No, not just me, because back then, before we gave all this up," Adriana waved her hand around Troll Bridge. "We had something. Both of us." Eric looked toward the trees, ignoring eye contact. "I just want to know how you f." Eric suddenly turned, held her face in his hands, and pressed his mouth over hers. Adriana's entire being froze, her thoughts, her body, everything. But when Eric pressed forward and kissed her again, warm and inviting, but carefully and so lovingly, she melted. Adriana pushed her fingers into his wavy hair by his ears and kissed him back. He hummed, a short, pained, needy sound as he threaded his fingers through her hair. She didn't understand how or why, but suddenly everything was him. It had always been him. Eric was kind and compassionate, he was smart and wise, he cared about her for her, and there were no words that could explain it. She'd always known from the beginning. Suddenly Eric pulled away with a tiny pop, panting. "Stop. Stop." Adriana rested her forehead against his, her nose beside his. She swallowed, trying to regain some sort of thought. Finally, she settled on one. Her heart plummeted. She'd just cheated on her boyfriend. Eric shook his head slightly. "I'm sorry. I never should have looked for you today." Adriana frowned and swept some of his hair back. "It's okay." "No, it's not." Eric frowned. "I don't want to cause problems for you." She swallowed hard, but strengthened her resolve. "I need to think about this." Eric shook his head. "No." "Yes, I do." "Don't just go and dump him for me," Eric exclaimed, pulling back a bit. "That's not fair to him or yourself. You've been dating almost 2 years." "No, I know." Adriana pressed her hands to her face. She sighed. "But I can't have both of you. And, can I be honest and say there are things about you that I care for more?" Eric's eyes widened slightly, but he shook his head. "I want you to do what you want. Not me, not Brandine. You. Neither of us guys should jerk you around like some plaything." Adriana thought back to Brandine's request a few weeks back. She didn't want intimacy like he did. Eric would never force that on her, even if he wanted it. If she said no, she had no question that he would never bring it up again. "We can't do this again," Eric said finally, breaking her silence. Adriana nodded. No matter how much we might want to, we can't. Eric said firmer. Unless you decide what you want to do and things change. But, it'd probably be best if we didn't go places alone again. Adriana's heart sank, but knew he was right. They couldn't make a habit out of this until she made a decision. And she had to make a decision. Can I get a hug? Or is that not okay anymore? Eric's expression softened and he smiled slightly. Seymour. Adriana stepped forward into his arms, burying her face in his neck like she always used to. Wrapped in his arms, she felt so calm and complete, like this was meant to be. Nobody could tell the future, but she could swear on her favorite book that this was supposed to happen. Just not yet. Then, Eric bowed his head and gently kissed her forehead. If he doesn't take care of you, I'll be the first one there. Adriana tightened her hold on him. I know. She then pulled back, and fought the urge to kiss his cheek. She felt like they were saying goodbye. Eric pursed his lips, swiped his thumb against her cheek one last time, then turned and strode away. He left her standing in the middle of Troll Bridge, their personal, childhood fairytale getaway. Adriana waited for him to disappear around the bend before turning to face the bridge and cave, the entire place overrun with weeds. Everything looked the same as when they'd first arrived. Except the gaping hole in the bridge, which felt as big and ominous as the hole in her heart. The much-anticipated game day had arrived. Adriana awoke early and found herself unable to fall asleep again. It was just as well, the dragon race would take place in the morning and she had a date. A date she had with a guy she wasn't sure she even liked anymore. She took great care in picking out her outfit, a pretty green and white outfit she usually reserved for special occasions. Green wasn't really her color but Brandine liked it, so that was reason enough. If she was going to break up with him, she wanted to at least look nice while she did so. Show some effort that said that she did care about him and his feelings. She slipped on a headband and marched downstairs for breakfast with a bounce in her step. You're up early, Finn said, raising an eyebrow. And cheerful, that's rare. Maybe I'm evolving, Finnegan. She smiled and scooped some eggs onto her plate. As she chewed, she hummed with contentment. These are really good eggs. Can you show me how to make them? I don't know, it's very complicated. Finn grandly gestured to the eggs simmering over the fire. Watch as I scramble them. Look, scrambled eggs. Very funny. Adriana rolled her eyes. So, fearless Finn, planning on destroying Dad in the race. Oh, he wishes. Hiccup chirped as he descended the staircase. But there's just no competing against the Dragon Conqueror. Toothless made a coo of assent. You're forgetting though. Finn pointed a spatula at him, I'm not pushing 40. Heck, I'm barely even pushing 20. All that may be true but I've got a few years of experience on you. Hiccup sat down at the table across from his daughter. You're up early. That's what Finn said. Adriana shrugged. Couldn't sleep. I don't know, I just have more energy today. Okay then. Hiccup shrugged. Where's Mom? Finn asked as he shoveled some eggs onto his own plate. Helping set up. Hiccup said. Better her than me. Gotta get my beauty sleep for the race, you know. Speaking of, why are you all dressed up? Finn turned to his twin. Going on a hot date. Adriana felt heat rise to her face. None of your business. Well, now I'm interested. Hiccup leaned forward, a twinkle of mischief in the bright green eyes she'd inherited. You can't miss the race, Addie. You've got to see me snatch Finn's flag out from under him. You wish. Finn stuck his tongue out at Hiccup, who gave him an exasperated look in return. Yeah, real mature, F. R-oo-oo. A scratching sound filled the kitchen as a big blue and green blur whipped by the window. A shrill whine followed. Come on, Zappy. Finn called to his begging dragon. We're still eating in here. R-oo-oo. Ah, let her in. Hiccup scarfed up the last of his eggs before the shockjaw could knock them off the table. Adriana only had a second to finish her eggs before Finn unleashed his dragon. Zap bounded around the table, getting directly in Adriana's face just as the girl managed to swallow her breakfast. Oh, no more for you. Adriana scratched Zap's chin, making her thump her foot against the wood floor. But it's okay, sweetie. I think your daddy has some yummy fishes to give you. Yes he does. Come on, princess. Finn opened a basket of fish and held a trout just over his head. Time for breakfast. Go get it. He tossed the fish across the room, prompting the excited dragon to bound over and catch it in her mouth. He laughed at the satisfied expression on her face as she chewed on her treat before running forward for another fish. Lily, who was napping peacefully under the stairs, growled in irritation. Ah, Lily. Adriana hopped up and got on her knees in front of her dragon. Is little sis bugging you? Lily gave her a withering look before flopping back down on the floor. Since Zap had entered their lives, the monstrous nightmare had been quite sullen. She and Tornado had gotten along quite well, but Zap irritated her to no end. Perhaps it was the fact that they were both female and Zap wasn't keen on being the least important member of the pack. The dominance battles had been fierce, and, finally sick of the dragons howling at each other like dogs, Hiccup had separated their sleeping spaces. This seemed to solve the problem. Has Lily eaten? Hiccup called from the table. Fed her this morning. Finn responded as he hurled another fish across the room for Zap. Well, you guys get ready for your race. I think I'm going to go. Adriana said, giving her dragon one last pat before standing up. She and Lily usually took evening flights together because neither of them liked getting up early. Have a great race. Hey now. Hiccup stood up and trotted over to her with a mischievous smile on his face. Is that any way to say goodbye to your dear old dad? Well, someone's affectionate this morning. Adriana rolled her eyes but gave him a kiss on the cheek. To her surprise, Hiccup hugged her. I love you, he whispered into her ear. Don't forget that. Adriana pulled away, fixing him with a confused expression. Am I dying? What? No. Hiccup tittered. Can't a father love his only daughter without the interrogation? Not so suddenly. Adriana smirked, feeling a rising sense of unease. Did Hiccup know she was skipping out on the dragon race for a date? Well, I do love you, Addie. Hiccup repeated, smiling fondly at her. And I'm proud of you. You're so sentimental. Finn stuck his tongue out in disgust. Just let her leave. One more word and I'll hug and kiss you goodbye. Hiccup shot back. Finn shrugged. Okay. I like hugs. I'll just have to make it mushy-gushy then and hug you in front of all your friends. Hiccup turned back to Adriana and grinned. He acts like this is such a shock, sometimes I wonder if he's got short-term memory issues. Anyway, I think the moment is ruined. Pretty much. Adriana breathed a laugh. Well, I'll see you after the race. See you. Hiccup let her go and patted her back. Go on, get out of here. Adriana practically skipped down the path to the village, hoping she wouldn't run into Brandine. But her boyfriend was nowhere to be found. Instead she found Ava running around the village square, pursued by Tough Nut. Nana, she shrieked, suddenly making a beeline for the teenager. Her little arms wrapped around one of Adriana's legs. Oh hi, Ava. Adriana attempted to pry the toddler's arms off her leg but it was no use. The little girl hid behind her babysitter, giggling loudly. Wait. Tough Nut stopped in his tracks and exaggerated his movements as he searched everywhere but behind Adriana. Where did Ava go? Anna, have you seen Ava? He gasped loudly. Has she been taken by trolls? Ava let out a giggle. Her fingers were pinching Adriana's bare skin but the haddock girl was quite used to this from many hours of babysitting. Did you hear that? Tough Nut shouted. That sounded a lot like her. Have you seen her? Now where could she be? I don't know, Tough Nut. Adriana said in loud voice so Ava could hear. Maybe Belch took her away. Oh no. Tough Nut yelped. Now she could be anywhere in the whole world. He spread his arms out wide as if bragging about a giant fish he'd caught. But I shall find her. True, it may take me 10, nay 20, nay 37 years but I shall find my little girl if it is the last thing I do. Adriana couldn't help but laugh. She simply loved watching Tough Nut and Ava play together. Fatherhood really suited him. It was funny, Tough Nut wasn't known for his brains and certainly not for his ability to take care of anyone, let alone a tiny human being. Marrying Svala had changed him for the better, but having Ava had made him into the man he was today. A gushy father, just as Hiccup had been. You know what, Tough Nut? Adriana tried to walk forward, but the toddler hanging on her leg made this difficult. Maybe she's closer than you think. Closer? Tough Nut put his hands to his face in mock surprise. Whatever do you mean, Miss Haddock? Are you perhaps harboring my only child as a fugitive? Well, my dear Haddock, justice will be served. He ran around her and pointed dramatically at his little daughter. Aha! And there she is. The scoundrel who escaped from me and sought out the enemy. I must find a way to counteract the horrible influence you have been on her. Tough Nut put a hand to his forehead in an exaggerated dramatic gesture. Oh, but what to do? What kind of punishment can indicate the severity of her crime? He put up a finger in triumph. Ah, I may have one. But is it too cruel? Oh well. I shall give it a go. All right, Ava Grace, guess what time it is? He approached her with wiggling fingers. She shrieked, a huge grin on her face. Tickle time. Adriana smiled fondly as Ava finally let go of her leg and tore down the path to the village. She heard the toddler scream when Tough Nut finally caught up with her. Those two were just so cute. Traipsing down the path, she finally reached the village, which was already bustling with people setting up the arena for the dragon race. She spotted her mother marching through, ordering men twice her size to carry planks and get out bleachers. The funny thing was the men obeyed her without question. Adriana wished she could do that. Yet another Horferson gene she hadn't inherited. She was just about to stop by the library when she spotted the barn door wide open. And inside the barn were the saddles the men would use for the race. Each saddle was clearly marked and all ready to go. And no one was guarding said barn. Now this, Adriana realized, was simply too good to resist. The Haddock girl loved pulling pranks. Ever since the ones she'd pulled on Tari and Ali nearly 7 years ago, she would occasionally come across a situation such as this and sneakily mess with her friends and family. Her personal favorite had been to craft a small, fake spider and stick it on Hiccup's pants. It had taken until Hiccup was in the Great Hall for anyone to point out, and it was satisfying to watch him shriek like a little girl and flail around before he realized it was fake. Despite his affinity for fire-breathing lizards big enough to crush a human being, Hiccup was irrationally, and hilariously, terrified of spiders. Adriana tiptoed into the barn and set up what was going to be a very annoying, and very amusing, prank. It took her a little while to figure out how to cover her tracks, but she sauntered out, looking as innocent as possible as she blended into the crowd. And just in time, she noted, as she saw Eric and Cliff walking to the barn together. Hey, came a voice just behind her. Adriana jumped and whirled around. Taryn, she smiled widely and hugged her friend. Where have you been? I haven't seen you around. My dad decided it was high time for some forced family fun and took us camping on the other side of Burke. Taryn rolled her eyes. It didn't go so well. I don't think we Brands are cut out for camping. My mom's taken Finn out a few times. Adriana shrugged, looking over in curiosity as her brother suddenly ran down the street with Zap on his heels. But 1 week out with my dad was enough for me. Taryn followed her gaze. No kidding. So how's the popular crowd? Adriana quipped, facing her friend once more. She couldn't understand her brother anyway to figure what shenanigans he might be concocting. Oh please, I wouldn't call them popular. A clique maybe, but not popular. Taryn thought about it for a moment before continuing. They're kinda. She bobbed her head back and forth. Adriana snickered. I understand the sentiment. Anyway, I'm going back to work on Monday and I'm definitely not looking forward to that. There was an incident at Gobus and we have to stitch up his pants. All of them. Well, that was probably either my brother's or my boyfriend's work. Adriana chuckled at the mental image of Finn blowing up a container with Gobus pants in them. Knowing Finn, I believe it. Taryn nodded with an equally big smile. So what are you doing here? Setting up the race. Oh yeah, these muscles were totally meant for carrying heavy objects. The Haddock girl shrugged. Nothing really, I'm just moseying until I meet up with Brandine. What about you? Same, just wandering around. I'm so bored. Hey. Taryn's face lit up. Can I do your hair? Oh my gods, exclaimed a familiar voice. The girls turned to see Finn talking animatedly to Cliff and Eric outside the barn. Adriana turned a shrug toward her friend, neither of them understanding what the boys were talking about from that distance. That's when another female blonde ran up from behind Finn with a large bucket in her arms. Helga Ingerman lifted the bucket over Finn's head, giving him a short warning before dumping the bucket over his head. Ice and cold water sloshed over Finn's face and drenched his shirt. Right. Finn jumped around, shaking the ice out of his shirt. Who, Helga? The blonde cackled and marched away proudly. Finn shook his head around, spraying the two boys and other standers-by. Okay. Who wants a hug? Instantly the haddock boy took off after Helga, who promptly screamed and ran away, throwing her bucket in a graceful flourish over her shoulder. Get away from me, Finn. Taryn and Adriana watched the exchange in laughter, just as Eric and Cliff. Adriana caught Eric's eye, giving him a warm smile. Eric shot her a short wink before looking away, sending her insides into a torrent of butterflies. Adriana shook her head. Dumb brother distracting me. Oh. My hair. Yes. Taryn exclaimed. It's so gorgeous. Oh please, I do nothing with it. Exactly why she wants to do something with it, Blondie. The girls turned once again to see Inga striding toward them, a short grin on her face. She's got a point. Taryn grinned. At the same time, that's all it is with you, hair and makeup and nails. Inga sassed. Of the three girls, she was definitely the least traditionally feminine, and it was amusing to watch her gripe loudly before she'd let them play with her hair. And even though she never said it, they could tell that she liked it. It's not just that. Adriana rolled her eyes. It's also boys. Inga sighed loudly. And books. Taryn added. And dragons. And whatever else we want to talk about, because we're not defined by a set list of topics. Taryn finished. Come join us, Inga. You know you want to. A girl's gotta spend some time away from all those men. Inga looked them over for a second before sighing even more dramatically and agreeing as reluctantly as possible. Both Taryn and Adriana knew this was an act. Inga enjoyed spending time with them, but the theatrics were because the three had very different personalities. Hide me. Helga suddenly whipped around the corner, snatched her hat off of a nearby young man and stood behind Adriana. She slapped the young man's hand when he tried to take his hat back. Relax, bub, I'll give it back. The guy gave her a critical look before turning back to his conversation. Apparently Finn had gotten her back because Adriana couldn't resist the smirk. I doubt he noticed your wet hair. Sure, you'll blow my cover. Helga hissed. Yet another different personality. Helga had always taken after her brawny mother, rough-nut Thorsten Ingerman, but she was also very smart and cunning like her strategist father, Fish Legs. Taryn leaned in close. We're going to have a hair and nails party real quick before the race and Anna's date. Want to come? I doubt Finn will find you there. Yeah, sounds good. What are friends for? Taryn smiled warmly. I've got to take care of my girls. What can I say? Adriana opened her mouth to speak when suddenly Finn crept around the corner, a mischievous grin on his face. Helga instantly backed away, confusing Taryn. What? Finn shocked them all when he pulled back Taryn's shirt and dropped the ice inside. Taryn screamed and jumped away, turning and trying to slap the boy. Finn took off, laughing. Come on Taryn, have some fun. Fearless Finn, do that again and I'll take a 2x4 to your backside. A few adults in the area cracked up, even the young man whose hat was still on Helga's head. The girls couldn't stifle their laughter as they helped pick the ice out of Taryn's shirt, but Finn's shocked expression was priceless. A 2x4? He asked incredulously. What, are you my mother now? Inga snorted. One does not invoke the wrath of Mama Taryn. Finn blinked. Mama Taryn. Taryn blushed. I'm not a mom. You're the mom of the group. Inga cried, inciting Helga's laughter. Which is a good thing. Adriana added quickly. Taryn straightened her now ice-free shirt. Regardless of what they call me, I suggest you not do that again or there won't be a hiding place good enough for you. Finn snickered. I'll consider myself warned. Taryn glared at his back, ignoring the girl's snickers when she finally turned. She gave them a stink eye, daring any of them to call her Mama Taryn again. Finally, she sighed, okay, let's get to my house. We don't have tons of time. The girls chatted as they walked, snickering about Finn's ridiculousness. Inga complimented Helga on her ice bucket prank, which started a whole new string of chatter. Finally, the girls arrived at the Brand house. So I'm thinking a loose fishtail braid, what do you think? Taryn asked, playing with a bit of Adriana's hair as she walked. You're kinda dressed up though. Hot date. Actually. Adriana said slowly as she opened the door and stepped inside after the girls. It's a little complicated. You, spill. Taryn grasped Adriana's shoulders and sat her down in a nearby chair. Well. Adriana sighed, allowing Taryn to tip her head back to begin the braid. Inga and Helga sat on the couch cross-legged, eagerly awaiting her story. Okay. What would you guys do if you were dating someone for a long time but then out of the blue there was someone else that you were possibly interested in but then it became apparent that he's really interested in you and suddenly you find yourself unsure of what to do? Inga rolled her eyes. Ah, don't be so coy. Dump Brandine, date Eric. End of story. Helga snorted and gave her a wolfish grin. I second that. Adriana blushed, but glanced up at Taryn. What do you think? She couldn't see Taryn, but could hear the smile in her voice. I think I want details. The Haddock girl slumped, but was instantly, but gently, prodded back up so her hair wouldn't get messed up. Adriana launched into the story, telling the girls about a few of her concerns with Brandine, keeping out his pressuring for a more intimate relationship, and the fun but very confusing and revealing afternoon with Eric a few days prior. Taryn stomped her heels on the floor quickly and squealed. That's so exciting. Adriana fought a smile. You think so? Helga made a ape-foot sound with her lips. Any one of us can tell that he's crazy about you. He always has been. Yeah, but what about Brandine? Adriana's smile fell. I didn't think anything would happen with Eric when we hung out, but it just sort of happened. He looked so dejected, I didn't want him to leave without talking about it. Inga waggled her eyebrows up and down. Except there been a lot less talking and more. Inga Jorgensen, I will come over there. Adriana tried to move forward, but found herself held back by her almost finished braid. No, we're almost done. Taryn exclaimed. Then you can attack her. Inga snickered from her chair while Helga mimed kissing sounds. Adriana's face flushed. Stoop. Oh girls, leave her alone, Taryn chided. I think it's adorable. That's not weird for you? Adriana asked, looking up at her when Taryn finally released her braid. She pet it gently to feel the soft coils of hair. Taryn perched on the edge of the couch between the other two girls, looking posh and pristine in her perfect posture. Inga and Helga looked like gobber after a few meads in the great hall with the way they were sprawled out. Eric's a good guy, but he wasn't the one for me, Taryn said carefully. I think through all the time we dated, deep down he still cared about you a lot. Adriana sighed, dipping her head back. Much good it did back then. I almost wish. She shook her head. Taryn sat forward, nearly falling off the couch. What? Oh gods, Helga huffed, reaching out and yanking Taryn back to sit fully on the couch. What? The auburn-haired girl asked with a frown. Girl, it's just us. Helga waved her hand around. Chillax. Ain't nobody here gonna make you be all prim and proper. Relax that stiff spine. Taryn gave her a look before glancing at the door. Finally she settled into the couch, looking somewhat relieved. Adriana could forget how very traditional the Brand parents were. They brought up their children to be calm, quiet and respectful, to sit up straight and look adults or acquaintances in the eye when spoken to. Adriana could remember when they were younger and Taryn had had to practically beg her parents to even let her own a dragon. Something about her learning to be a lady. She was glad the Brands had at long last conceded. She liked the Brand parents, truly, she did. But poor Tarin. It was obvious in the girl's dark eyes just how nice it was to be able to relax with friends, even if they still had to force her. Anyway, Tarin cleared her throat. What were you going to say, Anna? Oh. Adriana thought. I was going to say I almost wish I hadn't sent Brandine a message so soon. It was literally days after everything fell apart and we lost Binnen and Mr. Larson. Eric stopped talking to me and I instantly sent Brandine a terror message. Helga simpered. Do you regret it? Adriana shook her head. No, of course not. He's a good friend, albeit a little bossy or rude sometimes. But nobody's perfect. But there could be something better with Eric. Tarin asked. The blonde shrugged, holding out her hands. I don't know. But I think I need to make a decision soon. Tarin smiled at her warmly. Do what makes you happy. If you're not happy with Brandine, don't stay with him. But if you're only reconsidering because of Eric. Be fair, Helga assisted. Don't dump him just because of Eric. Especially don't start dating him soon after dumping him, if you do dump him. They've bickered a lot the last few months, Inga commented. You wouldn't want them to have a brawl, as amusing as that would be. Amusing? Adriana echoed. Eric isn't a fighter, Inga shrugged. He's a pacifist, like your dad. Wouldn't do for things to get messy, Helga agreed. Tarin glanced out the window and suddenly stood, as if she couldn't sit still for too long. Apparently her spine had had its fill of rest. All right girls, who wants a snack or drink? Mama Tarin, you're doing it again. Helga teased. I want to be a good hostess. Tarin cried. Why is that so bad? It's not. Adriana smiled, giving Helga and Inga a look. I'll help you. Inga kicked back on the couch. Sweet. I always wanted a servant. Adriana followed Tarin into the kitchen just beyond the living room. Don't let Finn hear you say that. Inga sat up, turning around to face them. Why? Adriana winced, glad Inga hadn't seen her expression. Never mind. Thanks, now I'm just curious. Curious? Helga asked, a teasing lilt in her voice. Why would you be curious about Finn? Oh boy, do we have another story? Tarin teased. Nope. Inga instantly flopped back onto the couch, ignoring the older girl's snickering. Definitely not. Cork it or I'll cork you. Adriana stifled a laugh and helped Tarin cut some cheese and biscuits. She decided they needed to do this more often, just gather together as a group and talk about random things. This was a random group of girls with varying personalities, but she found it refreshing in retrospect to the normal people she was with, mainly Finn and Eric and Cliff. It was nice to hang out with girls who weren't rude or snobbish. Perhaps there was something to be said for sisters as well as brothers. Adriana felt good about herself as she walked back out to the village square. She was dressed up with pretty hair and nails. It wasn't like her outer appearance meant the world to her, but some days, looking nice felt nice. She spotted the barn just as the last man and his dragon, which so happened to be Snotlout and Hookfang, walked in. This meant they were saddling up. Trying to hide her smirk, she decided to pay the guys a visit. Hey, hot shots, she chirped as she leaned into the large barn, where the guys were taking their equipment down to saddle up. How's it going? Well, I can tell you that I don't like racing saddles. Finn scowled at the one he was holding. They're weird. They're designed to keep you from breaking your tailbone, Finn. Hiccup called over, rolling his eyes. And from damaging other parts of your body. Several of the men winced in response to this. Adriana finally let herself smile. Racing saddles had become standard equipment with the new rules set forth by her own generation, not to mention the rougher play. And the best part about them was that, at first glance, they all looked exactly alike. Hold still. Cliff grunted as he attempted to fasten his saddle around his gronkel. Did you gain a ton of weight or what? Cliff's dragon gave him a withering look and smacked him on the side with her tail. Wait, the saddle doesn't fit. Mine fits. Tough Nut exclaimed, hopping onto Belch. The moment the dragon raised his head, the man fell sideways and landed on his shoulder. ACK. Nope. Scratch that. There's something wrong with it. It's loose. Hiccup suggested with a deadpan expression. Yeah. Hiccup, you're a genius. Tough Nut hopped up and clapped him on the back. What would I do without this guy, he added to the others with an affectionate grin. Hiccup raised an eyebrow at him. Getting kinda awkward, Tough. Wait, either Zap mysteriously lost weight after eating everything in sight or her saddle has now grown. Finn's eyes widened. Wait a minute. Guys, check your saddles. I think someone switched the labels on them. Adriana dearly wanted to brag about her brilliant scheme, but she forced herself to stay quiet and watch the mass confusion as the men attempted to figure out whose saddle belonged to whom. This never happens in the women's division. Snotlout mumbled irritably when he finally received the correct saddle. We all know what this means, right? Cliff blurted out in a carrying voice. Adriana grinned. Here came the show. Yes. Tough Nut shouted, making the men jump. There was a brief pause as all eyes turned to him. Wait, what were we talking about? This was no simple label mishap. No. This was deliberate. And with no evidence, we can only point the finger at one person. Cliff said dramatically. Mr. Trickster. Adriana wasn't sure whether or not to be flattered that she'd clearly done such a good job with her pranks that the villagers were referring to her as Mr. Trickster. Surely such a nice girl couldn't possibly have a mischievous side. She loved this about herself. It was so easy to slip under the radar. No one suspected she was involved, much less the perpetrator. No one except Finn, of course. But, curious to see how much Adriana could get away with, he hadn't ratted her out yet. Very funny, Mr. Trickster. Eric crossed his arms and fixed Tough Nut with a penetrating gaze. I am appalled that my own fellow hooligan would accuse me of such mayhem. True, Mr. Trickster is possibly the most brilliant man to ever set foot on Berk, but he is not I, nor am I he. I am but a pawn in his brilliant strategies. Tough Nut put his hand on his heart, suddenly overwhelmed with emotion. Bless this man. I will find you, Mount. Cliff growled. I will find you and I will put a stop to your dastardly deeds. Good luck with that. Adriana spoke up. It's been how many years now? And who has managed to catch him? Didn't we find a piece of his shirt last year? Asked Fishlegs as he secured his saddle on Meatlug. Yeah, but we didn't match it to anything. Hiccup reminded him. Adriana's smile widened. She'd planted that evidence on purpose. What they'd found wasn't even part of a shirt. She'd ripped it off a piece of leftover fabric from where Tarin worked. Well, there really isn't a law against harmless pranks, you know. Hiccup shrugged. Maybe you should write one. Snotlout stated. No pranks except on Loki Day. Yeah, Snotlout, I'll put a halt to this whole race just to go write a law preventing Mr. Trickster from doing harmless pranks like switching a few labels. Hiccup snooked. Don't forget to get a vote on it. Gustav added. Ah yes, that too. Hiccup nodded. He glanced over at his daughter, who was watching the scene with amusement. What brings you here, Addie? Want to see where the magic happens? Adriana snorted. Yeah, that's why. She was about to launch into an excuse when she felt a hand on her shoulder. She looked up to see Brandine staring down on her. I think we can leave them to their frivolity, he said, nodding to Hiccup before he steered Adriana away. So, are you ready for our date? I've got something awesome planned. It will blow your mind. Hey, no spoilers. Adriana laughed. She honestly liked this side of him. The carefree attitude had been what had attracted her to him, which only made what she wanted to do all the more difficult. I don't want to go into it with my mind pre-blown. Besides, we have stuff to talk about. It's always talk with you. Brandine rolled his eyes. It's enough to make me hope you'll be speechless with joy. The young couple passed the stragglers, all making their way to the race, which would probably be starting any minute. Finally, they arrived at the same barn they'd kissed in a few weeks before. Oh come on, Brandine, not again. Adriana sighed. I really don't want to have this discus woe. Her boyfriend had opened the barn door wide so that she could see the inside. A splash of red met her eyes. Brandine, Wow, she breathed as she stepped inside, barely hearing the door shut tightly behind her. The whole barn had been decked out in flowers and red cloth. Brandine had even painted little hearts on the walls in different shades of it. Clearly this had taken a lot of setting up. It's beautiful. Adriana turned around on the spot, drinking it all in. How did you? Took me a couple of days. But I wanted you to be surrounded by your favorite color. Brandine brushed her cheek with his thumb and kissed her firmly. This was different. She hadn't thought about it before, but Brandine's kisses were more deliberate, almost possessive. It was as if he expected her to take off mid-kiss. She felt his hands grasping her upper arm so that she couldn't get away from him. As she kissed him, she dearly wanted to put thoughts of Eric out of her head, but she simply couldn't help it. Eric had kissed her so lovingly, she knew that he would have let her go had she pulled away. But Brandine, she didn't know. Although there was one thing she did know. Eric would have remembered that her favorite color was purple, not red. Finally, she pulled away from Brandine, separating their lips. She felt the grip on her upper arms tighten ever so slightly. Brandine, I have a confession, she breathed, her heart racing. Come on, no more talking. Brandine leaned in to kiss her again, but she turned her head. Fine. What is it? I cheated. Brandine let go of her arms. You what? Adriana swallowed. I kissed someone. It just happened so fast that I didn't. Eric. Brandine growled, his eyes flashing. It's always Eric. He just kissed me out of nowhere. Adriana confessed, her stomach in knots. She had no idea how Brandine would react to this. Suddenly, the hardened look on Brandine's face turned into a strange sort of smile. The fire was still in his eyes, but his face looked almost friendly. It gave Adriana the creeps. It's all right, babe. We all slip up, he said in a falsely sweet voice. But I know the perfect way for you to make it up to me. No, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Adriana took a step back. Brandine was honestly starting to scare her. I think we want different things. Don't let Eric run your life. Brandine simpered. I'm your boyfriend. No, Brandine. I've had reservations about us for a while and you just keep pushing for things I don't want to do. Adriana felt her hands shaking and hid them behind her back. This was a lot harder than she thought it would be. I don't think we should see each other anymore. The smile faded. Brandine stood there, rigidly staring at her for nearly a full minute. Seriously, he asked in a tone she'd never heard before. I put all this work into decking out this barn for you. I forgave you for cheating, for Thor's sake. I've waited for you time and time again, and now, after all that, you think you can end it? Just like that? What are you talking about? Adriana's heart left her chest to thump in her ears. Before she had time to react, Brandine stepped forward and grabbed her wrist in a vice-like grip. Adriana tried to wiggle it away, but it was no use. Her little hand was no match for his massive one. I've given you everything I can and you never give back. He hissed. And this is not how it ends. Brandine, stop. Adriana squeaked, her whole body shaking with terror as she tried to wrench her hand away. You're hurting me. No. Brandine boomed, making her cower in terror. For once, I'm getting what I want. The sounds of jeering hooligans entered the barn, making Brandine smile down at her in fierce pleasure. And it looks like no one's around to save you this time. Panic gripped Adriana so hard, she almost couldn't move at first. Then the spell broke and she wrenched her arm out of Brandine's grasp. Get away from me. Wish I could, babe. Brandine said in a voice dripping with false concern. But it looks like we're stuck. This wasn't happening. Brandine couldn't be thinking of doing what he was so clearly indicating. This all had to be some horrible joke. Adriana felt adrenaline pumping through her as she just about dived past Brandine toward the barn door, pushing it as hard as she could. To her horror, it didn't budge. She could hear his footsteps growing closer and, out of the corner of her eye, his form looming behind her, a savage, almost insane grin twisting his once handsome face. Please let me go. She whimpered, her palms sweating and still pushing against the immovable door. I'm going to give you one more chance. Brandine leered over her, his hands unhooking the belt at his waist. We can do this the easy way. He yanked his belt off and dropped it with a clatter at her feet, or the hard way. Adriana dry swallowed, desperately looking anywhere but at him. His hands suddenly reached forward and, almost instinctively, she leaped out of the way. It was then that she spotted a ladder leading to the loft of the barn. If she could open the dragon hatch in the ceiling, she could climb out and call for help from one of the racers. It was her only chance of escape. Adrenaline surged again and she bolted toward the ladder like her life depended on it, and it probably did. As she climbed up, she distinctly heard Brandine's laughing behind her. So, hard way it is, he called up to her, his voice growing ever closer. I'm game. Adriana finally reached the top of the ladder, fear coursing through her in waves that made it difficult to draw breath. She reached the hatch and slammed her fists into it, only to discover that it too had been secured. She knew, in that instant, that this had been the plan. Brandine had trapped her on purpose. Help, she screamed, her voice tearing through her dry throat. Help me, please. A rough hand closed over her mouth. Shush, wouldn't want anyone to hear us, would we? Brandine hissed into her ear. There was only one course of action left. Adriana thrashed wildly, desperately trying to bite, punch, and kick every inch of him. If she could fight him off long enough, maybe someone would come. Maybe one of the racers would hear her. Maybe one of the dragons would sense her fear. This sort of thing wasn't supposed to happen. Not to her. To her surprise, she managed to free herself from his grasp, but she knew it was useless to try to run. He blocked every punch she threw, almost like he knew what she was about to do the split second before she did it. Desperation swelled within her as she did the one thing her father had told her to do if ever confronted with a dangerous man. She attempted to slam her knee into his groin. Brandine effortlessly blocked her attack. Not there. He bore down on her with the same terrifying smile. I need that. Adriana attempted to throw another punch, but Brandine closed his fist around her wrist. His other hand grabbed a huge handful of her hair as he threw her down onto the floor. Her head hit the wood with a sickening crack as his image swam in front of her vision. Unable to breathe, whether from the fall or from terror, she choked as he leered over her, roughly shoving his hand over her mouth. Hot tears poured out of her eyes as she stared up at him, her first boyfriend, a man she thought she had loved. Adriana squirmed and thrashed as hard as she could, every muscle in her body burning with effort, but she felt herself tiring quickly. She tried to scream for her parents, Finn, Eric, somebody. Anybody. Now, as she felt Brandine's hand at her waist and stared up into his cruel blue eyes, she knew she had fallen for the wrong man. And she was going to pay dearly for that mistake. Since she was a little girl and bad things started happening in her life, she always had faith that someone would come for her. That faith had been shattered before, but her trust in her family and friends had always been strengthened once more. But this time, nobody was coming. Nobody could help her. Nobody knew. Chapter 6, Naked. Chapter text. Naked. Adriana had never really known what that word truly meant until she had experienced its effects. As she lay stiffly on the dirty wooden planks beneath her panting boyfriend, her body ignited with sensations she had never believed possible. She now knew what it meant to be completely, truly naked. It wasn't like taking her clothes off for a bath with the door locked tightly and her dragon as her only witness. It wasn't like the memories she'd had of her parents bathing her. At least then they had been gentle, had put her at ease. Even Mara had done her best to make sure that her examinations had been brief and as comfortable as possible under the circumstances. But that wasn't nakedness. It never was. Though no clothes hid any parts of her body, she was still clothed in the sense that she was safe. That no one would take advantage of her. That no one would force his way inside of her. But now, as she lay there struggling to breathe, her body mostly clothed but its most intimate part feeling as if it had been ripped to pieces, she knew that now she was truly, completely, unequivocally naked. It seemed to last forever. Like someone had stabbed her over and over and over again until she couldn't stand it anymore. She begged the gods to kill her so she wouldn't be subject to such agony even a second longer. Brandine's weight crushed her so drawing breath became nearly impossible. Even if his hand hadn't been covering her mouth, she never would have been able to scream. This had to be how it ended. The nearly 17-year life of Adriana Haddock snuffed out under the weight of the man she'd trusted for nearly 2 years. And then it was over. Brandine let out a tiny grunt and the stabbing stopped. Adriana opened her eyes and stared up at him. The twisted smile was back on his face as he removed his hand from her mouth. The girl tried to take a deep breath but she felt crushed by his weight. "Now, do we want to do this again?" he hissed in her ear. Terror seized her at the mere thought. She shook her head vehemently. "Okay. Then we're going to be keeping quiet, won't we? No running off to tell Daddy. No talking to Eric or the annoying one anymore. Not even the girls. You're going to be right next to me." Adriana nodded. She would do anything to get away from him. To have even a moment to herself. The smell of Brandine's cologne overwhelmed her senses and she felt physically ill. Actually, Brandine's smile widened. "No. I'll give you one last conversation with Eric. You're going to tell him you hate his guts and you never want to see him again. You're going to say you wish he'd died the day he lost his leg because your friendship has been a lie all this time. I don't care what you tell him, but you're going to tell him whatever is needed to make him go away. Got it?" Adriana whimpered. Brandine bore down harder on her, his teeth gritted. "Got it." She nodded. "Why yes," she choked. Please. Let you go?" Brandine asked in a voice full of false sweetness. "All right, babe." He got up off her, hitching his pants around his waist. "Go home." Adriana gasped once his weight was off of her body. In one fluid movement, she too pulled up her pants and scooted toward the ladder. Every movement hurt, her head throbbing and her whole body tender. She nearly cried again as she tried to climb down the ladder, moving her legs sent waves of agony all through her abdomen. When her feet hit the floor, she wobbled and grabbed the ladder for support. Out of the corner of her eye, she could see Brandine staring down at her, his horrible smile still on his face. "Oh wait," he called down. Adriana froze. Was he going to do it again? Could he do it again so soon? She winced when he climbed down the ladder after her. "I have to let you out, don't I?" The girl shuddered when he passed her. But, true to his word, Brandine jimmied the lock and unlatched a series of latches. The barn door swung open. "After you, milady." He mock bowed to her and gestured out into the blinding sunlight. She wanted to tell him to go ahead and leave her there. She didn't know if she could walk straight. Even shifting her weight the tiniest bit sent little pangs all through her body. Brandine watched her struggle with an almost triumphant expression. When she finally reached the door, he blocked her. "Oh, no, goodbye kiss." He stuck out his lower lip in mock disappointment. "Come on, sugar. I am your boyfriend." His filthy lips were on hers before she could even react. Adriana stood very still, praying that he would finish so that she could leave. Her hands shook so hard she placed them in her pockets and her lungs began to ache from the lack of oxygen. Brandine finally broke away, his hands on her face like a perverted version of Eric's embrace days ago. "No Eric. No girls. No telling," he whispered in her face before he allowed her to pass him. Just as she thought this was over, that she could finally begin to process what had just happened, she felt him smack her bottom rather hard. She stumbled forward but continued walking. If she looked back, she might lose control. And if she lost control, she didn't even want to think about that. Each step seemed to take all of her concentration. She winced in pain when she tried to take larger strides so her walking was slow. She didn't know when Brandine finally went his separate way. All she felt was the sweeping relief when she realized he was no longer behind her. The race had ended and the villagers poured from the arena, all chattering about what had happened and the dangerous stunts that had taken place. Her heart ached, how she longed to be one of them. To be walking back home with a smile on her face, either encouraging or consoling her father and brother. When she reached the square, several eyes fell on her. And though her brain knew that no one knew her secret, her heart raced and she felt as if each and every person was judging her. She soon found that focusing on the ground helped her focus on her goal, which was simply to return home as quickly as possible. Just as she was about to reach the hill that led to her house, she spotted a 2 feet in her way. Her eyes suddenly rose and met the sharp gray of Tough Nut's. Her whole body tensed, the pains she was experiencing suddenly heightening and making it difficult to think. Tough Nut's face was covered in his usual design, which looked more like he'd coated it in shoe polish than anything. His face lit up when he recognized her. "That was awesome," he exclaimed. She stopped herself from wincing at his loud voice. The way Hiccup was like "You shall not pass," and then Cliff was like "Yeah, you and what army?" And then Finn. And Snotlout. It was amazing. Of course, you saw it. Rather than try to speak, Adriana turned her mouth up in a smile that she knew would not come close to reaching her eyes. She nodded as convincingly as she could. "Yeah, it was the best." Tough Nut continued. "That's gonna go down in the history books as the greatest." "Anna," he paused, looking her up and down with an almost calculating gaze. "You don't look so good." Adriana tensed. He knew. No. He couldn't possibly know. But he knew something. She swallowed thickly. "I'm all right," she breathed. "Tired?" "Man, you really don't look good." Tough Nut reached out to touch her braid and she flinched. "Oh, sorry. I just thought I saw hay in there." Adriana grabbed her braid and found the piece of hay to which he was referring. She yanked it out. "I'm fine, Tough. I just feel a little sick. Going home." Tough Nut took a few steps backward. "Well, if you're gonna bath, do it outside. Inside is messy." She nodded again and pushed past him, hoping that he would forget the encounter and move on. How she wished she could do this so easily. She thanked the gods that no one was home when she walked into the house. Lily, who was snoozing by the fireplace, lifted her head and stared at her human for a few seconds. Then she slowly crept forward and sniffed a bit more. She was used to her human's boyfriend's smell by now, but this was different. His scent was far more powerful than it had ever been on someone other than him. And it was in places that she knew it had never been before. She made eye contact with her human and, with a thrill of horror, suddenly knew what had happened. The low groan that came from her throat was the saddest noise Adriana had ever heard her make. "I know," she whispered, gently stroking her dragon's chin. "I need to get him off." Lily almost shoved her in the direction of the washroom. Adriana didn't need much prodding to convince her to move, but the monstrous nightmare hated how strong the scent of her human's boyfriend remained or the slight whiff of blood she kept catching. When they arrived in the washroom and Lily made absolutely certain that the door was bolted shut and the curtains drawn, she helped Adriana by drawing out the water from the small well Hiccup had dug and making sure Adriana poured enough into the large tub. As she heated the water, Adriana disrobed and left her clothes in a heap on the floor. As she got in the tub, Lily spotted drops of pinkish blood on her human's underwear. She turned back and was horrified at the state of the girl's skin. There were bruises up and down her back and on her legs. With an almost mournful groan, she used her snout to push the soap forward. "Thank you," Adriana whispered. The girl immediately got to work scrubbing her entire body. The warm water soothed the parts of her that hurt the most, making her sigh in relief, but she couldn't slow down. She could still smell him, still feel him all over her body. The soap's smell wasn't strong enough, but she continued to scrub. Finally, the soap had disintegrated in her hand and she finally felt a bit less sore. Lily grabbed a towel from a hook on the wall and handed it to her as she stood up. Adriana wrapped herself tightly and grabbed her clothes. At first she considered putting them back on. But the idea of wearing something that would remind her of this nearly made her physically ill. She examined them for a few minutes. She had no emotional attachments to a single item of clothing in her hand. Good. That would make it easy. After pounding up the stairs, her dragon at her heels, and putting on some fresh, clean clothes, she rushed back down the stairs with a fistful of the clothes she had just been wearing. There was no fire in the fire pit and no one was home. She could still smell him through the material and nothing would get it out. Nothing ever could. With a burst of rage she didn't know she possessed, she pitched her clothes in the pit and pointed at it, indicating to Lily that she wanted it lit. Lily shot a tiny flame at the wood and cloth and it immediately ignited. Soon the house was filled with the pleasant fragrance of a crackling fire. And the smell of brandine was finally gone. But not the sensation. His hands still trailed every inch of her back. His torso still crushed hers. His heavy breathing still echoed in her ear. And no matter how much she tried to take her mind off of it, everything kept coming back. Adriana curled up on the couch and watched her clothes burn until they were no longer recognizable. Lily rested her head against the back of the couch and nuzzled her face. As the girl stroked her dragon absent-mindedly, she tried to feel something. Anything. An emotion, an original thought, anything except blank horror. Shock. She wanted to cry but the tears wouldn't come. Her insides were empty except for the memories of mere minutes ago. They replayed over and over so that she could barely breathe with the pressure on her chest. The only feeling she could even begin to adopt was appreciation for her dragon. Lily didn't know about the ways humans perceived what had happened, but she did know that her human needed a friend. That's what made dragons so special. That's why her father fought so hard for their protection. And why she would one day make sure that his fight wasn't in vain. But for now, she simply allowed her dragon to try to bring back the deadness inside. Hiccup gave his son a smile when he marched down the stairs for breakfast. Finn immediately charged into the kitchen to make breakfast. Adriana didn't appear to be up yet, though he wasn't surprised. Adriana didn't like getting up early. "All right guys, here's the plan," Astrid announced as she stomped down the stairs. "I'm at the arena until 4 today, so everyone behave, no skipping meals." "Finn, are you going hunting?" "Yup." Finn replied through a mouthful of oatmeal. A long, low horn sounded from outside across the island. Hiccup turned in his chair toward the window. Finn stepped around the corner when the horn sounded again. "What's that?" "Ships approaching." Hiccup dropped the dagger onto the nearest windowsill and marched out the door, Astrid on his heels. They ran to their dragons, who were already prancing in the grass, eager to check out who was approaching their territory. "Easy but," Hiccup said calmly as he leaped into the saddle. "Could just be Johan for all we know. But we're not expecting him for another few weeks," Astrid said. The chief and his dragon took off into the air without further comment. They shot across the bridge that separated their house from the rest of the village. Hiccup took note of Snotlout and Gustav already taking to the air with a few other council members. Toothless landed at the edge of the cliff overlooking the ocean just beyond the outskirts of the village, the port directly below. Pebbles clattered over the edge when the Night Fury's claws hit the ground. Hiccup called out to the sentry standing in a nearby post. "How many?" "Just one, sir." "One," Hiccup muttered under his breath, relaxing instantly. One ship they could take if it happened to be someone hostile. He pulled an spyglass from his saddlebag and looked through, ignoring the sound of flapping wings behind him. "Dad, who is it?" "Finn, you should have stayed home," Astrid scolded. "Why?" "Outcasts," Hiccup interrupted, setting down the spyglass. Astrid frowned. "What do they want?" "Don't know. I don't see Ali though." Gustav huffed nearby. "Well, after poisoning you, she'd better not show her face here." Hiccup usually wasn't one to jump to conclusions or take an aggressive approach. But he heartily agreed with the Larson. Granted, he'd been mostly delirious when he'd told Horst his suspicions about poison on the blade. She probably hadn't cleaned it. Outcasts weren't exactly known for their cleanliness in any area. It shouldn't be any surprise that the chiefess's weapon would be disgusting beyond measure. For all he knew, she'd gutted somebody weeks before fighting him and he'd contracted some horrendous disease. "Sir." The chief shook himself. "Sorry, what was that?" The sentry repeated his question, "How would you like to proceed?" Hiccup looked through the spyglass once again, surveying the ship. It appeared to only be a small group of guards. The ship itself wasn't that big. Still. "Let them in. But I want eyes on all of them at all times." "Yes, sir." "Riders, fan out." Astrid moved Stormfly closer. "Where do you want me?" Hiccup quirked a lopsided grin at her. "Probably nothing to worry about here. You can go to the arena as planned." "You sure?" "Yes." Finn bounced up and down, but only because Zap wiggled in anticipation to get moving. He set a hand on her side to calm her. What about me? Hiccup turned away from the ocean, scratching Toothless' jaw as he spoke. I thought you were going hunting. Well, that was the plan, but I want to help with something. The chief smiled knowingly. Don't worry about it, buddy. If there were more than 3 ships I'd place you somewhere, but I don't think it's necessary. Finn's face fell in a pout. But... Finn, it's Saturday. Hiccup raised his eyebrows. So you don't need to work today. Go relax, have fun, flirt with girls, go do something that doesn't involve work. But I like work. Hiccup smiled. Which is good, but you're also a 16. Trust me, when you're in my position you won't get days off. Go be a kid, Finn. I'll call you if I need you. Finn looked generally dissatisfied with the situation, but finally he sighed. Okay. A tar boy. Take him away, Zapster. Zap jumped in excitement before spreading her wings wide and taking off. The haddocks watched the shockjaw carry their son away before they arced toward the forest and soon disappeared. Astrid interrupted his thoughts. I'm going to the arena then. Okay. I'll send you a terror about what's going on. Okay. Astrid jumped down from Stormfly and pulled him down for a quick kiss. Hiccup smiled as he watched her leave with Stormfly moments later. 20 years later and you still can't get kissed without some kind of sappy smile. Hiccup twisted toward Snotlout and shrugged. Some things never get old. Oh yeah? Well. Gustav cleared his throat. For your sake, you should probably just not reply to that. Snotlout looked affronted. And why ever not? Because if your wife finds out you made some stupid, insensitive comment she might break out the double-bladed axe. Gustav said, snickering with Hiccup. Not that that wouldn't be awesome, mind you. Hiccup cleared his throat before things got too out of hand. You two with me. Let's see who's here. The trio dove toward the port just in time for the ship to dock. Most of the outcasts stayed on the ship save for one, a tall, well-muscled, dark-haired man stepped off the ship and watched Hiccup with a beady-eyed gaze as he landed and climbed off his dragon. Hello, Hiccup held out a hand. The man firmly accepted the handshake. Good, he was civil enough. That alone was rare with outcasts. What can I help you with? The man's gaze traveled up to the village. My name is Roscoe. I'm here to speak to an old friend. I was given permission from Chief Ali to visit for a short period of time. I'll be on my way before noontime if all goes well. Hiccup shrugged. Sounds all right to me. Who do you need to speak to? Brandine Anderson. A bud of concern blossomed in Hiccup's chest. Is everything all right with his mother? Oh yes, Roscoe waved a hand. She's fine. I'm an old family friend. She asked me to take a trip out here and visit the boy, thought it would be good to check in without her heckling. Hiccup nodded, waving toward the stairs. I'll take you to him. Much obliged. The men began their gradual ascent, Roscoe glancing cautiously at every dragon he passed. Hiccup quickly deduced that he wasn't really a fan of dragons. Then again, few outcasts were. Brandine was one of the fair few. How long have you known Brandine? Hiccup asked when they reached the top. He led the outcast into the village toward the direction of Brandine's house. Roscoe spared him a short glance. Told you. Family friend. Yes, but I'm sure he'd have mentioned you if you were close. Roscoe paused and turned another tight-lipped look on the chief. Hiccup felt his spine stiffen under his scrutiny and heard the beginnings of a low growl in Toothless' throat. All right, if you must know, Roscoe snapped. After the boy's father was brutally murdered and Lofen and the child were left alone, I stepped in whenever I could to see they were cared for. Hiccup held his eye for a few more seconds before dipping his head in acknowledgement. Roscoe visibly relaxed and they continued down the street. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was weird about the guy, but Brandine never had been one to talk much about his past. Then again, neither was Finn. Soon enough they reached the small house Brandine lived and Hiccup knocked on the door. A few moments later the door opened. Brandine stared at Hiccup in surprise for a moment before his eyes fell on Roscoe. Being his old family friend, Hiccup expected the teenager's face to split into a grin. He expected some sort of emotion linked to happiness or surprise. But instead the edges of Brandine's mouth tightened and his eyes narrowed ever so slightly. Roscoe Brandine remarked flatly. Brandine. Hiccup glanced between the two of them in concern. Somebody want to explain what's going on here? Brandine's look faltered and he spared Hiccup an apologetic glance. Sorry. Just surprising is all. Roscoe rolled his eyes. Don't be a drama queen. You've been gone for years. Now you show up. I make a living out at sea, boy. How was anyone to tell me you'd moved to Burke? Like you cared anyway. Okay, okay. Hiccup waved his hands. Do I need to protect you in any way, Brandine? Brandine's eyes narrowed in an offended glare. Protection for what? Hiccup shook his head. Not every day we get outcasts popping in to speak to my villagers. But it wouldn't be the first time a civil war was started over citizenship. No. The teenager rolled his eyes, but he managed a smile. Roscoe's just being an idiot. Says the kid who left without telling me. Sea travel. Terrible terror messaging. Roscoe cried. Hiccup sighed. Well, I'll leave you two to this. Enjoy this blessed reunion in peace. What, you're not going to stick around? Brandine called after him. Hiccup climbed into Toothless' saddle. I've had my fair share of arguments with outcasts over the years. Any more of this and I'm going to need a drink. Thanks for the offer though. Brandine rolled his eyes again. See you later, Chief. Come on, bud. The chief took one last look at the two men before Toothless shot into the air. In the back of his mind he felt weird about the situation, but he had no basis for worry or confusion. An old family friend of the Andersons had decided to come to Burke to visit Brandine. It almost sounded like something Benin would have done, except his relationship with Finn was a lot more caring and devoted. Brandine and Roscoe sounded like two wild nadders fighting over a piece of meat. There had to be more to their history than an old man who never came around. Surely if they were close, any of the Haddocks would have heard of Roscoe by now. Whatever the situation was, he didn't need to get in the middle of it. He was the chief of Burke, he had 1,000,001 things to do today and every other day. The last thing he needed to worry about was Brandine drama. As usual, he was probably worrying over nothing. Finn crashed through the underbrush at top speeds, running as fast as he possibly could. He heard the rising power in his dragon's wings before. Finn tucked and rolled to the side in time for Zap's electric blast to explode against the ground. Not her strongest attacks of course, she didn't want to hurt him. But this was all part of their training together. He'd discovered upon the first day of their meeting how much power she had. Then once she'd officially moved in and they'd started experimenting, his dad and Fishlegs taking furious notes day by day, it became soon apparent that a Shockjaw had some serious electric power. Not as much as a Skrill, but pretty close. Zap shot another blast at him, which he dodged once again. He'd only ever been severely hit by her electricity once and half his body had tingled for the next day and a half. His parents hadn't been too happy over their carelessness. But now they'd been training for a long period of time and they rarely hit each other. Also, this was a good time for them to get all their extra bursts of energy out, especially Zap's, before the day really got started. Saturday morning was their time to hunt and work out, and they enjoyed every second of it. Eventually Zap landed in front of him, blocking his way. Finn tried to run around her, but she swiftly swung her tail and caught his left leg. He tumbled to the ground with a pronounced, very manly G. Zap chortled down at him before licking his face. Oh shut up, doofus. The dragon yipped at him in disdain, clearly offended. Don't you sass me. Aru. Finn sat up and sculled. Aru to you. Aru. Awoo. Finn copied her, just to make her do it longer. Aru. Finn cracked up as he sat in the dirt, watching his dragon howl to the treetops simply because he'd started sassing her. He still couldn't believe how silly she was. Such a drama queen. Zap huffed in his face and toppled him onto his back when she started licking his face. Gar stop it. You. Finn wiped his face off as best he could on his already sweaty shirt. Good thing Inga's not here to see this. The boy froze and suddenly groaned. I didn't just say that out loud. Zap chortled in his face and then yanked him back to his feet by his shirt, careful not to pop holes in the material. Oh hush, one day I'm gonna mock you for inconceivable crushes. Like Charger. Zap squawked, turned tail and walked away. Finn chortled and ran after her. Yeah, that's right, I said it. Zappy likes Charger, ha ha ha. Zap suddenly stood at attention, head cocked to one side. She turned toward the right and growled lowly. Finn paused, listening. He could hear a couple of men arguing in the distance. Sure, stay close, Zap. Finn crept forward through the woods as quietly as he could. They traveled for a few minutes until finally they got close enough to make out the voices clearly. CK to the plan. We've been over this, boy. How long do you expect us to wait around? I expect you to wait as long as necessary. Before Finn could place the voices, one familiar, the other new, Zap accidentally rammed into him from behind and toppled him through the bushes. Finn caught himself before he could fall flat on his face, and he shot a glare back at his sheepish dragon. But when he faced forward, he could only be surprised. Brandine stood there next to a man he'd never seen before, all clad in dark materials and armor with thick black hair and beard and scathing eyes. But it wasn't the man who surprised him. The look on Brandine's face was murderous. Did your dad send you? Finn blinked. No. Then why are you here? Deciding to play it safe, Finn gestured over his shoulder. Just out hunting with my dragon, in case you hadn't noticed. Well, in case you hadn't noticed, Brandine spat. We were in the middle of a conversation before you butted in. Yeah, and I'm sorry about that, Finn remarked flatly. But if you wanted a private conversation, maybe you should do a lot less yelling and more talking indoors where sound doesn't carry. Just a word of advice. Brandine's face slowly reddened and Finn wondered what the guy's deal was. What were they talking about? What did he mean, wait as long as necessary? Wait for what? But the other young man interrupted his musings. Are you done here or would you like to eavesdrop more? Finn glared, grasped Zap's shoulder strap on his saddle and pulled her toward the direction they'd come. They didn't stop walking for a long while and didn't hear voices at all after that. Finn didn't know what to make of the situation. He hadn't really heard anything that concerning, but still. Whatever it was weird. The most interesting, and frightening, part was how quickly Brandine's emotions could flip like a coin the last few days. The guy seemed to be getting more agitated with every passing day. More than once he'd walked into work to find Brandine muttering under his breath as if he was having a conversation with someone Finn couldn't see. It was weird. He was beginning to wonder if he still liked his sister dating him. More and more red flags seemed to be going up by the day, but nothing so serious that he had to tell someone. That someone being his father. Was it his place to voice his concerns? Was it too early? Finn sighed heavily. Too many questions, Zappy. Too many questions. Adriana never was an early riser. But she supposed lack of sleep would drive anyone to get restless. Every time she closed her eyes, she could see him. His cold blue gaze, his hand over her mouth, that horrible, twisted smile, there was no escaping him. Every bump in the night made her panic and throw the covers over her head. And then she would see him in the darkness and throw them off with a gasp. Her head pounded, probably from slamming into the hard wooden planks. If Lily weren't sleeping on the floor next to her, she thought she might have died from the sheer panic that seemed constantly below the surface. She thought she might have dozed off a few times, but she wasn't sure. All she knew for certain was that it had never been like this with Trista. She had been tiny, alone, and terrified, but she had never given up hoping that she would be rescued. And then she was. As jumpy and frightened as she had been after the experience, as many nightmares as she had endured, she had gotten past it. Even in recent years, her nightmares were oddly warped, like she was finally forgetting details like Trista's face and the voice of the man she had killed. She would still wake up covered in sweat, but she would be fine. She didn't need her daddy to come in and hug her. Now, Brandine was everywhere. He was in the creaking of the floorboards downstairs. He was in the steady throbbing of her head and other parts of her body. He was in the bruises she had found on the inside of her legs and on her wrists. He was in the foul scent of his cologne she could still smell. His panting was still echoing in her head. Even after her bath had soothed her, she could still feel him inside of her. No, this was nothing like what she had experienced with Trista. This was worse. At long last, once she heard her family leave after the horns blew, she felt like it was safe to come out. She didn't know if she wanted to be around people right now, but she also didn't want to be alone. It was a strange, paradoxical feeling that she wouldn't be able to explain even on her most articulate of days. The previous night, she had skipped out on the party at the Great Hall and gone to bed before her family got back. She wondered why no one came to check on her, but honestly, she preferred not having anyone around. Finally, she decided to get up and get dressed. She slipped out of bed, yawning and stretching. As soon as she opened up her dresser drawer, she nearly retched. Atop her untidy pile of clean shirts was a bright red one. The color red seemed to burn her senses and she threw it aside so she wouldn't have to look at it. She wasn't sure she could ever look at the color red without being reminded of the walls of the barn, the paint on the ceiling she stared at while Brandine. She avoided thinking the word. If she dwelt on it, it would become real. She would have to accept the loss of more than just her innocence. Once she'd thrown on an outfit without really thinking about it, she went down the stairs and slipped out. She didn't care that she hadn't brushed her hair or her teeth. She just needed to get out. To breathe in fresh air. She could hear Lily waddling behind her, apparently deciding that she shouldn't be completely alone. Adriana wanted to go for a flight, but she couldn't straddle anything without white-hot pain radiating through her body. She didn't much feel like riding Sideciddle. The sun was coming up as she entered the village. She made a split-second decision to simply stop and watch it rise. She needed to witness something beautiful, some sort of reminder that life would go on. That maybe, as the sun rose above the horizon and into the sky, her nightmares would end. But she wasn't so naive to actually believe it. She had lost that knife long before any little girl should. Hey! Adriana screamed and whirled around. Her heart rate eased slightly when she saw Cliff standing in front of her, looking extremely apologetic. "Sorry," he exclaimed, holding his hands out in a placating gesture. "I didn't mean to startle you." "It's fine," the girl breathed. "Just don't sneak up on me like that." "I'm sorry," Cliff repeated, looking like Finn did when he accidentally stepped on Zap's tail. I don't usually see you out here this early." "Didn't sleep." Adriana glanced around her to make sure no one was listening. She spotted trees plenty big enough for a full-grown man to hide behind, but she wasn't about to go looking for eavesdroppers. "Anyway, I should." "Brandine said you were sick yesterday." Cliff interrupted. "Feeling better." Adriana felt a pang of horror, but she fought to keep her expression neutral. Brandine had gone to the party. After everything he'd done, he'd actually looked her family in the eye and told them a straight-up lie to cover up what he had forced on her in that barn. "No," she said simply, dearly wanting Cliff to leave so Brandine wouldn't catch them talking. "Oh. Okay. What are you up to?" Cliff asked, still not leaving. "Well, I was going to go talk to Eric." "He's not up yet." Cliff knitted his brow. "Are you sure you're okay?" "I don't know, you seem tense." Adriana became suddenly aware that she had started gripping her saddle rather hard. Even Lily stared at her with concern. She loosed her grip and dusted off her hands. "Headache," she said. "I'm going now." "Maybe you should go tomorrow." "I'm fine, Cliff." Adriana insisted. "Just go, okay?" Without waiting for her friend to respond, she marched into town. The village was fairly quiet, which wasn't unusual at this time of day. It wasn't like everyone on Burke awoke with the sun. She wanted to go for a flight. Perhaps the cool air in her face would clear her mind. But the soreness between her legs twinged uncomfortably. Outhouse trips alone were painful. She hated to imagine how much worse it would be to straddle anything. She stared up at the open sky as a few dragons flew overhead, wishing she could join them. Maybe she'd fly away from Burke and communicate with her family and friends via Terra so Brandine would never find her. but it would be open season on her loved ones if she did that. If Brandine was willing to do what he had done to her, she shuddered to think about what he would do to the people she loved. "All right there," Gobber called. Adriana jumped, though not as much as she had with Cliff. "Yeah," she called back, trying to force a false smile on her face. "Good. See me for a second, will ya?" Adriana felt dread rising in her stomach, but she shakily walked toward him and entered the forge. On a normal day, she liked visits to the forge. Gobber was always good for a laugh, especially when he started telling stories about her father as a teenager. Today though, she just wanted to get through the next 12 hours without breaking down. "What is it?" she asked shortly, though she hoped it wasn't altogether out of character. She knew she could be snippy on the best of mornings if she was out of bed too early. "Oh, don't be a drama queen." Gobber waved his remaining hand. "Just need ya to hold this terror still while I yank out her tooth." He gestured to a cage with a furious green terrible terror in it. "Oh. Okay." Adriana approached the cage with her hand outstretched. The terror squawked loudly at her. "Easy, girl. I know it hurts now, but Gobber's going to make it all better." She heard Gobber digging loudly for pliers, so she kept her voice low so he wouldn't hear. The terror stopped thrashing and sniffed her curiously. "Yeah. You can smell it too, can't you?" Adriana whispered. "I can't wash it off." The terror eyed her suspiciously. Perhaps it was the scent of the aura Adriana gave off, but it seemed to soothe her a bit. Maybe she thought that if this girl knew pain and still trusted Gobber, maybe she could too. More likely, it was the fact that the haddock girl was simply more maternal and a bit easier on the eyes than a giant man with missing limbs. Adriana wasn't sure if dragons could make comparisons like that, but it wasn't unlike them to make strange connections. She took a chance and opened the cage. The terror hopped into her arms and cooed. She immediately licked the girl's face. "Thanks," Adriana whispered before looking over in Gobber's direction. "I think she's calmed down now. Just don't make any sudden moves. I've been doing this since before you were born. I think I know my way around at her." The terror in Adriana's arms began to growl menacingly. Gobber stopped bustling around and the growling stopped. "All right, maybe not this one. Course I'm not as familiar with her. She's new, see. Gustav just brought her home. The one he had is getting too old for long distances." Adriana felt a pang deep within her. Eric's brother. Would she be allowed to talk to him? Could she talk to Magnus? Even Nicholas would be a relief compared to Brandine, and she'd never much liked him. She wasn't paying attention to what was going on until the terror squealed in pain as Gobber yanked out her saw tooth. "It's okay," Adriana assured the little dragon. "You're fine." But the terror seemed to have realized that this was a lot better than the pains she'd had before. Her thrashing stopped and she felt the gap in her teeth for a moment before apparently deciding she preferred not having it. The brief soreness from the extraction was nothing compared to the agony of it remaining in her mouth. "There. That wasn't so bad, now was it?" Gobber patted the terror, who nipped his finger playfully before hopping out of Adriana's arms and flying off, probably back to Gustav. "No new tooth?" asked Adriana as Gobber disposed of the old one. "Baby tooth. It'll take a bit of time, but it'll grow back." Gobber put the pliers back in the drawer. Adriana felt rather stupid. She'd gotten Lily after her adult teeth were in, but Zap had lost all her baby teeth not long after Finn had gotten her. She'd gone through a bit of a teething stage as well. There were still marks on some of the furniture from that unfortunate period of time. "I should go," Adriana said at last. "Stuff to do. You never stop by anymore, Anna." Gobber shut the drawer and turned to face her. "You're tired of listening to me yammer on about the good old days?" "No." Adriana shrugged. "Just haven't been around, I guess." Gobber smirked. "Saw you walking around with Eric the other day. Is that why you're not hanging around?" "Gods know you two had a thing for each other since." "We're over," Adriana interrupted. We're not a couple. Or friends. Or anything." "Oh." Gobber paused for a moment, processing this information. "Didn't realize you had a falling out." "I should go," the girl repeated. She walked out of the forge before Gobber could continue talking to her. It hadn't occurred to her just how odd it would be, not just for her but for the rest of the village, if she was quite suddenly not friends with anyone except Brandine anymore. Would anyone guess? She didn't see how they could, well, not figure it out. She hoped to Thor that maybe Brandine would grow tired of keeping her by his side. He certainly didn't like talking to her very much anymore. Why would he want her nearby all the time? These questions, though important, simply couldn't be asked if she wanted to keep him from hurting her again. And the only way to do that was to have a last conversation with Eric. The thought of telling him everything Brandine had told her to say made her physically ill. Especially after what had happened at Trollbridge. How could she truly expect him to buy those excuses? She had kissed him back, after all. She hardly knew where she was going anymore. Lily poked her in the back with her snout when Adriana stopped in front of Eric's house. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her dragon, turning around and patting her head. "I don't." "Lily, how can I?" She felt her throat constrict painfully as she tried to force down her tears. "You're my only friend now." Lily made a sad sort of coo and looked up at her with wide yellow eyes. She flopped down on the ground, nodding her head like she wanted Adriana to get down with her. The girl obliged, assuming the position they often took when Lily was napping and Adriana was reading. Neither girl nor dragon cared that they were in plain view of the village. Of all the haddock dragons, Lily was definitely the most maternal. Perhaps raising little Signa, Charger's baby, had given her this instinct. Or maybe she'd always had it. But unlike Stormfly, who spent an inordinate amount of time grooming herself and occasionally Astrid and Finn, Lily liked to groom others. She didn't like seeing her humans in physical or emotional pain. Though she was with Adriana most of the time, she had done her fair share of hovering around Hiccup when he was upset. More than any other dragon, she simply felt out the general mood of the haddocks and adapted to it. On a good day, she had boundless energy and could even be seen sassing Zap quite a bit. On a bad day, she offered comfort to everyone. And on the rare occasion any of the haddocks, especially Adriana, was in peril, she was definitely a frightening presence. But now, offering comfort was the only way she could help out. She hated the lingering scent of her girl's boyfriend. Adriana had bruises in horrible places that no man should have touched without her permission. And if there were bruises, there wasn't permission. Lily knew that much. She'd seen other dragons, sporting injuries from the bites and scratches of uninterested possible mates. They didn't know how long they'd sat there. Adriana snuggled into the dragon's neck for what felt like hours. She didn't need the assurance that everything would be okay because she had no idea if it would. But now, all she needed was her dragon's presence. She'd nearly forgotten why she was there when she suddenly felt the slimy sensation of an unfamiliar dragon's snout in her face. She opened her eyes and the bright green face of Charger took over her vision. He squawked questioningly. "Sorry," Adriana said sheepishly, moving to get up. "I'll get out of your territory." "Charger, chill," came a voice that made the girl's blood run cold. Eric walked over, his eyes alight with amusement at his dragon, who seemed to have been bending over her as if she was a questionable fish. He was dressed in blue today. Adriana wasn't usually the type of person to notice what anyone was wearing, but she loved Eric in blue. His favorite color suited him well. Adriana stood up and stared at Eric, unsure of what to do or say. How could anyone tell their best friend to go away permanently? "You all right?" Eric asked, his brow furrowed in concern. Adriana hoped she assumed a neutral expression. The only way to get through this would be to shut off her emotions completely. If she thought about how he made her feel, how much she wanted to hug him and tell him what happened, how crazy he drove her, she would break down sobbing. "I have to talk to you," she said in a dead sort of voice. "What about?" Eric's concerned expression didn't let up and it was all Adriana could do not to spill her secrets to him. "We can't see each other anymore," Adriana blurted out. "So? I'm just saying goodbye. That's all." "What?" Eric's eyes widened with something that looked almost like fear. "Did Brandine say something?" "No, that kiss was a mistake. And I don't." Adriana took a deep breath. "I don't want to lead you on anymore." I know how you feel about me and it would be better for us both if we're not friends. Annie, if Brandine said something. He didn't say anything. Adriana lied, her heart thumping rather hard in her ears. I thought about it and I want to be with him. The big, sad teal eyes turned on her, making her legs feel like jelly. But, Annie, I know the kiss was a mistake. But you kissed me back. I shouldn't have. But you did. Eric reminded her in a patient tone. It doesn't make sense. We've been friends since we were kids, we were fine. Did I do something? Did I say something? No. If I hurt you. You didn't. Then why are you saying this so suddenly? Eric stepped forward and reached out, but Adriana shied away from his advance. Annie, you can tell me anything. Not anymore. Adriana said quietly. We're done, Eric. Annie. Just leave me alone. Adriana snapped. The Haddock girl turned around, unable to bear the sight of his saddened expression for even a second longer. For her sake, it was a good thing she didn't look back as she walked away. If she had seen the tears welling up in his eyes, the broken pieces of her heart would have shattered once again. Eric watched in complete distress as Adriana walked away from him. He vaguely noticed Lily croon at him sadly before she tramped after her rider. His vision swam a moment before the tears pooled down his face. He worked his jaw, wiped his face and stared at the dirt between his foot and prosthetic. He never should have kissed her. This was his fault. He never should have hung out with her, let alone allow himself to get so caught up in how much he cared about her that he'd risk their entire relationship. Adriana had said she wanted to think things through. Clearly she'd made her decision considering which boy she cared about more. Eric looked at her once again, now far off in the village streets before she took a turn and disappeared. He wanted nothing more than to run after her and demand answers. He wanted her to know just how he felt, he wanted her to understand that she was being ridiculously unfair. He never should have kissed her to begin with, but why would she find it okay to jerk him around like this? To act like she'd seriously give him any consideration at all, just to yank out the rug from underneath his feet. Charger squawked and bumped his shoulder. Eric sniffed and looked up at his dragon, distractedly patting his snout. What now, buddy? Charger gave him a sad roar in response before turning and running away. Eric sighed. Thanks for your support. Hey. Eric turned just in time to be nearly bowled over in a Cliff hug. The Larson boy gasped loudly when Cliff lifted him off the ground, squeezing him tight around his ribs. Gah. Cliff let go. Eric roughly extracted himself from the curly-top's grip. Cliff's grin fell in concern. What's wrong? Eric avoided eye contact. I don't want to talk about it. Cliff watched him quietly. You sure? Eric glared. Cliff nodded once resolutely. Okay then. Hey, let's go get some grub. I'm starving. I'm not hungry. I am. Come on. Cliff grabbed Eric's arm and nearly dragged him through the streets. Finn said he had something to show us or something. Or maybe it was tell us something. I dunno. Eric sighed, pulling his arm away. Do you ever stop being so happy? Cliff frowned. Why would I want to stop being happy? Oh, I don't know. Maybe because some people aren't in the mood for happy right now. Bruh, I am a happy guy. Happy is my middle name. I was born for adventure, the wind in my sails, curly locks flowing as I ride out into the sunset with my trusty steed Edna Louise Sacramento III, also known as Bill, as my only witness to my vast significance. Cliff. Sorry. The boys walked through the streets in silence from there on, Eric glaring at the ground as he went. He fought the urge to hit something. Or pull his dagger out of his boot and cause other damage. Eric ground to a halt in the middle of the street. A young woman had to dodge him as she walked past since he'd stopped in her path. He was shocked at the sudden turn his thoughts had taken. It had been a long time since he'd had any actual thoughts of harming himself, mostly because in the last year things had been going much better. He hadn't had any reason to harm himself. But now that Adriana had officially dumped him, both as a friend and potential future boyfriend, he suddenly felt helpless and hated again. He hated himself for approaching her, for scaring her away, for causing Brandine to say whatever he said to her when he found out. Whatever had happened, it was definitely his fault. And now he was fighting the urge to punish himself for it. "You okay?" Eric looked up at Cliff, standing a few feet away looking concerned. He needed to tell him. They were roommates after all, and best friends. He shouldn't allow himself to think those kinds of dark thoughts before it became unbearable. He didn't want to come to that point in his life again. He had to control himself, and that's why eventually Hiccup had given him a new dagger as a present and symbol of trust. Hiccup trusted him. He needed to resist temptation and do the right thing. "Yeah," Eric said, walking in step with his friend when he caught up. "I'll tell you later." "Alrighty then." The boys took the stairs to the Great Hall faster than Eric might have liked, seeing as a quarter of the way up Cliff challenged him to a race. They each took 2, 3 stairs at a time until they reached the top, nearly tripping over each other on the way. Finn sat atop Zack by the center pillars, watching down in amusement. "Slowpokes. You two are like a couple old ladies." Finn smirked down at them. Zack chortled in time for a random arm to slap the air on the leg. Finn winced and mumbled an apology to the elderly woman marching into the Great Hall. Cliff snorted. "Smooth, Finn. Not as smooth as your clumsy tripping and flopping around that you call a run." "Hey." Eric rolled his eyes. "You guys sound like a couple bickering old women." Finn winced. "Careful, they're not as deaf as they look." Cliff and Eric guffawed as they followed the redhead into the Great Hall. "You are so bad." Eric laughed. "Hey, he got you to smile." Cliff cheered. "Even I couldn't do that." Finn elbowed Eric as they gathered food on their plates with other villagers. "Why the long face?" Eric sighed. "I don't know, your sister doesn't love you." "That's sad." "That's exactly it, actually." "Eh?" Cliff mumbled around a roll sticking out of his mouth. "Huo Alin Abo." Eric sighed. "Long story." Finn raised an eyebrow. "Tell me you didn't understand what he just said." He asked what I'm talking about. "So?" Finn snorted. "You're weird." "No, it's deductive reasoning." Cliff spat the roll onto his plate as they sat down. "Or deductive hearing. Is that a thing?" "It is now," Eric snickered. "So what's this big news you were telling Cliff about?" Finn fought a grin and leaned forward. "So my dad and Gobber were being all weird this morning when I got back from hunting. They made me stand still and straight up and hold my arms out while they took measurements." "Measurements?" Cliff asked around a mouthful of bread. "For what?" Finn shrugged. "Dunno. But I have a theory." "Well, you'll be 17," Eric mused as he poked at his food. "Your dad's been prepping you for the chieftainship lately, hasn't he?" "Yeah," Finn said excitedly. "So? I'm wondering if they're making armor." Cliff dropped his fork. "Wait, like legit armor made just for you?" "That's so cool." "I know. Gods, that would be so cool." Finn gushed, forgetting his full plate of food. Eric found the whole situation humorous. It was pretty rare that teenagers got armor made specifically for them, especially when they were still growing like Finn. He'd probably fill out a bit more in the next few years. But he trained so much it made perfect sense for him to get his own suit of armor. Assuming that's what they were getting measurements for anyway. "You excited to be chief?" Eric asked casually. Finn chewed a little slower, glancing across the crowd of people. "Yes and no, I mean." He shrugged. "My dad's not going anywhere anytime soon and he's still in his prime, so I figure I won't have to worry about it for at least a few more years." "Yeah, but are you looking forward to it?" The haddock shrugged. "When I was younger, that was the thing. It was what I most looked forward to. But to be honest, the older I get, the scarier it gets." Eric nodded. "Makes sense. Can't be too confident, I suppose." "I'm confident," Cliff stated firmly, scraping his fork across his plate. "To be friends with the heir at all is pretty sweet, but to be friends with the future chief, I just..." Cliff placed his hand over his chest, reached out and held Finn's wrist. "I feel so honored." Finn carefully pulled his arm back. And suddenly I've lost my appetite. Oh, shut up and eat, haddock. You've never lost an appetite a day in your life. Finn frowned. He looked like he wanted to make a comment but refrained. Cliff sighed and shoved his plates away in time for Helga to plop down beside him. She promptly shoved his plates off the table onto the floor and leaned on the table to peer at them. So what's up with you and Adriana? Eric's food went bitter in his mouth. He stared at his plate and carefully swallowed, trying to come up with an answer. He saw Finn's frown out of the corner of his eye. What do you mean? Well, she's been so mopey and standoffish all day, and when someone asked about it, Brandine snapped that you two had a fight. Cliff gasped. You did? Eric felt his face heat up. No. Brandine needs to shut his face because we didn't fight about anything. Whoa. Finn exhaled with a smile. Somebody's angry. I'm not angry. Eric snapped. Finn's eyebrows disappeared into this hairline. Helga's expression read aha, sure. Eric bit back an annoyed groan, fiddling with his fork. It's nothing. Doesn't look like nothing. I don't want to talk about it. Eric bit out. Larson. Cliff suddenly stood. I think we all need some desserts. Hang tight, I'll be back, friends. I'll go with you, Eric sighed, thankful for the distraction. He snatched his plates and followed Cliff. Just before turning away, he saw Finn give Helga a look that said good job. Eric didn't really want a dessert. He hadn't been very hungry anyway and had forced himself to eat, but he really wasn't feeling sweets right now. His stomach was queasy from anxiety and anger, and Helga pressing him hadn't helped matters. Cliff, however, marched up to the dessert table, surveyed his options, and finally decided on marshmallows. The entire bowl. Eric frowned. What? Cliff asked, holding the bowl possessively to his chest. Eric pointed over his shoulder, where three little girls were standing with wide eyes at the very tall teenager who'd confiscated the bowl of sugary goodness. Oh. I'm sorry. Here, take as many as you want. Cliff bent down. The girls giggled and snatched handfuls of marshmallows before taking off, dropping a few along the way. Eric shook his head with a smile when Cliff followed him back to the table. All right, friends, Cliff announced, cutting off Finn and Helga's conversation. I have a new game to teach you. Finn leaned against his fist, shooting a glance at Eric when he sat beside him. Oh yeah. Yes. The idea, my pupils, Cliff held up a few marshmallows, is to see how many marshmallows you can fit into your mouth before you can't put any more in. Helga snorted. Or until you choke. Basically. Eric sighed. Oh Thor. Come on, Larson, it'll be fun. Cliff promptly opened his mouth and began stuffing marshmallows into it. You've got to be kidding me. Nor, of course not. Cliff. What? Don't be ridiculous. I am Fantabuwooth and oh, you know it. Eric shook his head, ducking his eyes behind his open palm in a feeble attempt to block the other boy from his view. Finn's shoulders shook beside him, desperately trying to hold back laughter. Eric chanced to look at the Smedley boy one more time. Cliff gave him a not-so-subtle wink as he tried to shove another marshmallow into his mouth. I call it the chewy buey, Cliff said through a mouthful. Helga grinned. The what now? The chewy buey. Eric shook his head. What? Cliff stuffed another marshmallow into his mouth, rolled his eyes and pulled a charcoal pencil out of his pocket. He quickly wrote the words Chubby Bunny on the old wood. Chubby Bunny. Finn read aloud. Why? I on out, Cliff said, grabbing two more sugary puffs from the bowl in front of him. That's just what I all it. Eric swallowed thickly. You're going to make me gag. Right on cue, Cliff slapped a hand over his mouth and breathed deeply, sending a wrathful glare at the Larson boy. Shoo up. Finn pounded the table competitively. Two more. Come on, Smedley. No. Eric chided. How would we get that out of his throat if he choked? Helga nodded. Good point. 10 gold coins says he can't get 5 more in there. You're on, Bones. Finn slapped her hand. Oh gods, Eric sighed, watching as Cliff carefully pushed more into his mouth. "How many do you have in there?" Cliff carefully held up his hands. 10. "Oh come on, no more, please." Taryn walked past their table a moment later, Inga on her heels. Both girls paused, taking in the scene with amusement on their faces. Cliff shrugged his eyebrows at Taryn, but then bent over into giggles. "Cliff, that's disgusting." Taryn chided, but they could tell she was holding back a smile. Finn slapped the table with both hands. "Come on, 2 more." Eric watched in fear and amazement as Cliff managed to stuff 2 more in his mouth. "That's 12. Can he make it to 15? Helga cheered. Cliff suddenly shook his head, eyes wide. He quickly turned to the side and proceeded to spit out the massive gob of slobbery marshmallows. A resounding "oh" echoed through the great hall from the teenagers' table, Taryn promptly marching away with a pronounced squeal of disgust. Ignoring the kids' laughter, Cliff threw away the marshmallows into the nearest trash can. It was then that he noticed Hiccup and Toothless standing beside the trash can, giving him a curious and disgusted look. Toothless ducked his head into the trash can and sniffed before pulling back with a repulsed growl. Cliff gave them a slimy salute. "Gotta live while you're young, Chief." Eric shared a snicker with Hiccup before Cliff returned to the table and the Chief moved on. The Larson boy honestly didn't know how he'd become friends with such a weirdo. Finn and Helga were still bickering over their bet. That was disgusting," Eric said when Cliff sat down. "Oh come on, it was fun." Cliff grinned. He smacked his lips together for a moment before jumping back up. "I need a drink." "BRB." Eric blinked at the empty space before him. "BRB. Be right back." Helga chimed. "Duh. Yeah, duh." Finn smirked, ignoring the slap on his arm from the blonde. "Shouldn't you know these things?" Eric waved a hand. "I take these things with a grain of salt." Cliff quickly returned with a drink in hand, already half empty. "You guys need more adventure in your lives." Eric snorted. "If that's an adventure, I think I've had more than my fair share." "Oh come on, Rakaipu, that was noth." "Rakaipu!" Eric exclaimed. Finn and Helga erupted into laughter, Cliff merely held out his arms. "I say whatever comes to mind, okay? You should be used to it by now." "Oh no, I'll never get used to this sort of madness. Someone's gotta keep you on your toes." Eric rolled his eyes and took a long drink from his mug. He listened to Finn and Helga's banter intently, even though his eyes strayed to a certain blonde sitting a few tables away. Helga was right. Even though Adriana had claimed she was happier with Brandine, she looked miserable sitting next to him. There were a few inches of space between them, but as if the guy could sense his thoughts, Brandine snaked an arm around her waist and pulled her against his side. Adriana instantly tensed and generally looked uncomfortable. However, he could tell she was putting up a front. Eric had known her since they were toddlers. He knew when she was uncomfortable with something. But he also knew when she wanted to show that discomfort. Adriana had been through many terrible things in her life and she'd gotten quite good at hiding her true emotions. Most times she wouldn't hide her feelings from people, she was most natural wearing her heart on her sleeve, just like her father. But the slight wrinkle of her brow, tight line of her mouth, and slight hunch of her shoulders were like red flags to Eric. She didn't like him touching her. More and more as time went on, Eric despised the guy. He didn't even know why, but since day one he felt like he could see right through him. He didn't know who the guy was or what his aim was, but something about him just felt wrong. Of course, he'd never acted on such suspicions. He'd always chalked it up to jealousy, even back when he and Adriana still weren't talking. He'd ditched her and she'd run to Brandine with open arms. It was almost as if he'd been so easily replaceable, like their friendship hadn't mattered all that much if she'd gotten a new friend, particularly a guy, so quickly after their fallout. Then there was the kiss. If not for the stupid kiss he just couldn't resist, he might still entertain those thoughts of self-degradation and pin himself down as the mere best friend who'd be nothing more. He'd been so sure she'd shove him away. But when she'd melted into his arms and kissed him back, he suddenly knew she had to have some feelings for him. Even if she was dating Brandine for this long, She wouldn't have allowed a kiss to happen if she didn't feel anything at all. Right. Are you okay? Eric turned to Finn in surprise. Yeah, sorry. Spaced out. Finn didn't spare him a glance, leaning forward. Not you. Cliff. Are you okay? Eric faced forward and he instantly stiffened. In the mere minutes since he'd looked at his friend last, Cliff's face had paled considerably and his hands shook against the table. Hey, Eric reached out and grabbed his friend's arm. What's wrong? Cliff moaned. I don't feel good all of a sudden. You don't look good all of a sudden, Finn said worriedly. Must have been the chubby bunny. Helga snickered. Helga, this isn't funny. Eric stood and walked around the table. Should we find Mara? Finn asked. No. Cliff mumbled through his hands. Don't bother her right now. We've got someone closer. Finn turned around and waved to a nearby table. Inga. Hey, come here. From his seat beside Cliff, Eric glanced up and saw Inga leave her table and walk over. What? Something's wrong with Cliff. Eric felt Cliff begin to shake. Hey, do you need water? The teenager shook his head and rested his arms on the table. If it was possible for someone to pale more, he did. Inga gasped, leaning down to feel his forehead. Whoa. Okay, yes, water. Finn stood to get water, but Cliff suddenly clambered to his feet. Inga grasped his shoulders. Cliff, I want you to sit down. Cliff shook his head and teetered past her. She grabbed his arm, but he rushed in front of the trash can once again in time to expel the contents of his stomach. Eric stood behind his friend in shock, a hand on his back in comfort, but Inga suddenly pushed him back. Go get Mara. Right now. Eric didn't know why Cliff was suddenly so sick, but it didn't seem to be like any flu bug he'd seen before. It definitely hadn't been that fast when he got sick a few weeks ago. The worry in Inga's eyes forced him to turn away and look for the healer, who also happened to be Cliff's aunt. He jogged through the endless tables until he found his mother. Mom. Where's Mara? Lara raised an eyebrow. How should I know? I don't keep track. Mom, this is urgent. Have you seen her? No. What's wrong? Eric looked around the hall once again, ignoring her growing concern. Find Cliff's mom. He finally spied Mara talking to some women a few yards away and ran toward her. Mara. Mara's easy smile evaporated when she saw the worry on his face. What is it? Cliff. Eric pointed to the general area. I don't know, but one minute he was fine, the next. Mara moved past him and ran through the endless tables toward the teenagers section. Inga and Finn were kneeling beside Cliff, who seemed to be violently ill. Oh gods, Mara murmured, shooing Finn out of the way. Cliff, try to breathe slow, honey. Cliff shook his head, his body nearly heaving of its own accord. His forehead beaded with sweat and body racked with shivers so much that Mara wrapped her arms around his shoulders. Finn grasped Eric's elbow and backed him up. What's wrong with him? I don't know, Finn murmured. What's going on? The boys turned to see Hiccup walking up at a brisk pace. Mara, is he okay? Hiccup asked in concern. I don't know. Mara muttered, accepting a cup of water from Inga. Cliff, try to drink some of this. Cliff shook his head, panting and shivering. Watching him struggle was painful to watch. What's wrong with me? It's just a bug, honey. No, I was fine 5 minutes ago. Cliff groaned. Oh gods. Back up. Mara shooed everyone back just as Cliff launched himself toward the trash can again and threw up again, this time his knees buckling. Hiccup backed the boys up, even as Mara kept telling her nephew everything was fine. It was definitely not fine. Dad, something is very wrong, Finn said in a shaky voice. Hiccup faced him, green eyes hard. Does he have allergies? Cliff. The boys moved out of the way as his mother, Dahlia, ran past and joined her sister in comforting the teen, even as he threw up once again. Boys. Does he have an allergy? No. Eric shook his head. Not that we know of. What was he eating and drinking? Finn held up his hands. The same stuff we had. We're fine. Besides, if it was food poisoning, more people would be getting sick. Hiccup sighed. I know. What was he drinking? I don't know what, but that was his cup. Eric pointed to the table. Hiccup turned and grabbed the cup, ignoring Helga, who was still sitting there, now white as a sheet. Helga, you all right? The girl shook herself. Yeah. Yeah, Chief, just shaken I guess. Hiccup nodded and looked inside the cup. Looks like water. Finn held Eric's arms. I hope it wasn't the marshmallows. But he didn't eat those. Doesn't mean there wasn't something on them. Marshmallows? Hiccup asked, remembering the Chubby Bunny incident. Eric gasped. The little girls. Oh man. What little Eric? Eric pushed through the crowds, looking for the 3 little girls who'd taken marshmallows from the bowl. He could hear Hiccup marching behind him, but he pressed forward, skimming faces until finally one little girl looked familiar. She sat at a table beside her 2 friends, all giggling at their piles of marshmallows that now looked like little snowmen. Eric sighed in relief. Never mind. They ate marshmallows too? Hiccup asked. Yeah, but they seem to be fine. Hiccup made a non-committal sound in the back of his throat and held up the cup. He swiped an empty bowl off a nearby table, dumped the leftover broth onto the floor and poured the water out of the cup. He held the cup into the nearest torchlight and inspected inside. Eric frowned with mounting concern. What are you looking for? Hiccup scowled and swiped a finger along the inside of the cup. When he pulled it out, a white residue covered his fingertip. He looked at Eric and asked, do you know what this is? Eric swallowed. Should I? The chief didn't answer. He turned and marched back toward the group, where Cliff had seemed to run out of energy and things to throw up. Mara and Inga had lain him down on his back, where he'd thrown an arm over his eyes and continually whimpered in pain. Delia brushed his hair back in an attempt at comfort. The healer and assistant were discussing moving him to the healing house when Hiccup stepped into the group. Look in the cup. Mara shared a concerned look before she took it and also checked the inside. She felt the residue between her fingers before gently applying some to the tip of her tongue. A dark look overcame her features. Let's get him to my house. Then we'll talk. Hiccup nodded and turned toward the crowd full of busybody villagers crowding the group, calmly but firmly asking everyone to back up and give the healer space. Mara began issuing orders for people to do something helpful or go away. Eric backed up, unsure where he could be most useful when his friend was lying on the cold stone floor looking as if he was dying. He hoped to every god that existed that he wasn't. He hadn't been very kind to him, and other than Adriana, he'd never had a better friend. He couldn't lose both in one day. He couldn't. Hey, he'll be okay. Hiccup said, standing next to him. What's wrong with him? What is that stuff? Eric demanded. Hiccup pursed his lips. I don't want it getting out in here. We'll talk at Mara's. But. Hiccup gave him a look and he closed his mouth. Eric sighed and nodded. See you there. The chief marched off, leaving him standing there feeling overall helpless and confused. Finn and Helga didn't look any better. Even Tarin standing nearby looked distressed. They were also concerned. Cliff had been completely fine 1 minute and the next. That's when Eric caught Adriana's eye from the other side of the room. She instantly looked away as if she didn't care, as if one of her good friends wasn't extremely sick or worse. Then, he saw Brandine's calculating smirk being sent his way. Brandine, who'd been nothing more than a mere rival for the girl they both cared for, had suddenly taken on a new light in Eric's eyes. Adriana's strange attitude and actions, Cliff suddenly getting sick after being perfectly fine, the subtle look being sent his way, like a warning. They had to be connected somehow. Eric didn't know if his suspicions were right, but he knew something was seriously off about this whole thing. If he was right and he found out Brandine was hurting his friends to threaten him, to make him leave Adriana alone, he was surely mistaken. He would not be chased away so easily and he would not lose friends in the process. If he was wrong, then maybe Cliff really did have a sudden allergy or had gotten a bad sickness very quickly. Maybe the residue in the cup was nothing more than dried soap from a poor wash job half finished. If he was wrong, Maybe Adriana hated him after all. Brandine's fingers pressed into Adriana's wrist as they watched the events unfold. Cliff repeatedly vomited into a trash bin until his knees buckled. Inga and Finn held him steady, but the curly-haired boy seemed to be struggling for control over his own body. When Eric returned with Mara, who quickly checked on her nephew, Adriana fought the urge to tear her wrist from Brandine's grasp and run over. Her friend was ailing, more than ailing. Something was extremely wrong and she wanted to be there at least for support if she couldn't do anything to help. The worry on everyone's faces was evident. But Brandine's grip tightened when she so much as shifted on the bench. From the corner of her eye, she could see him staring at her imposingly. A few minutes later, the adults helped Cliff onto a stretcher and a few men carried him out. She nearly gasped when she caught a glimpse of Cliff's condition from the corner of her eye. Pale, sweaty, hard breathing and an overall expression of pain. When Eric caught her eye, she looked away and stared at the table, unsure what to do. She hoped he wouldn't approach their table. She didn't know what Brandine would do and she didn't want things to get messier. Finally, Brandine's grip relaxed on her wrist and she quickly pulled away, cradling it in her other hand. She didn't want to look down at it, but could tell by the sensation of her swelling skin that it would bruise. She glanced up through her hair to see that her friends had dispersed through the Great Hall, or disappeared altogether. She wished Eric would come back. Brandine's hand suddenly drifted onto her thigh and she squirmed away. Brandine slid closer, wrapped an arm around her waist and mashed her side into his, forbidding her from moving away. "Where do you think you're going?" he murmured into her hair, a genuine smile on his face. Adriana's heart pounded. To anyone watching, this wouldn't look out of place. He'd pulled her closer countless times before now. The only thing she had to do now was force herself to look happy about it, when really all she wanted to do was run away from him. She turned her head away from his probing lips, which grazed her ear. Her stomach threatened to heave. What did you do to Cliff?" Brandine breathed a laugh. "Don't tell me you'd rather talk about that loser." Adriana faced him head-on, attempting courage. "What did you do?" He rolled his eyes and sighed, playing with the hair at her neck. Adriana focused on his other hand reaching into a pocket on his belt, even as he spoke casually as if they were talking about the weather or a regular date. She saw a small vial inside the pouch before he closed it again. Her eyes widened and she stared at him. "What is that?" A warning. Brandine smiled, brushing her hair back. Despite the smile, she could see the danger in his eyes. "The next one dies." Adriana ground her teeth together, fighting emotion. "I can't help it if they talk to me." "Yes, you can." Brandine smiled humorlessly. "You don't talk to them." A flare of anger riddled Adriana's system. "How long do you expect to keep this up? You won't be able to fool everyone forever." Brandine's grip on her neck tightened, which remained hidden underneath her long hair. "Don't test me," he threatened quietly. "Because I don't think you'll want a little repeat of our last episode together, if you know what I mean. Just do as I ask, because I care about you, and nothing will go wrong." "Is that so hard?" Adriana tried to gather her courage, but it seemed to shrivel away under his gaze. Finally, she pushed his arm off her shoulder and stood. "I'm late for work. See you for dinner." Brandine smiled knowingly. "Hold on." He stood and before she could move away, he firmly planted a kiss on her mouth. Adriana fought the urge to jerk away, knowing in a public place people would notice her displeasure if she displayed it so openly. Finally, he had enough and pulled away, smiling victoriously before the look morphed into his usual, honest smile. "See you later." Adriana turned and walked away, but not before he slapped her behind as she passed. She yelped and walked quicker, ducking her head when a random adult gave her a shrewd look. If only they knew what was really going on. She nearly ran down the stairs. If not for the soreness in her muscles from Brandine's cruelty, she might have sprinted. She wanted to get down to the healers as fast as possible to see what was wrong with Cliff. Adriana froze at the bottom of the steps. She couldn't do that, could she? She couldn't check on Cliff. She couldn't talk to Eric anymore. She couldn't even ask Inga or Tarin, she couldn't risk their safety. She wanted to help and be there for her friends. Her real friends. They were the ones who really cared about her. She really cared about them deep down. She couldn't keep up this facade of false loyalty to Brandine when she really didn't have an ounce of feelings for him anymore. Not after what he did. Not after what he was making her do and then doing to her friends on top of it. Adriana sighed, wishing she could march back into that hall, slap him in the face and tell everyone how terrible he was. But she knew she couldn't do it that way. She had to be smarter than that. Guess I'll have to go home and wait for results. Adriana sighed. She wished she had work today. She'd only told Brandine that to get away from him. She was surprised he hadn't remembered that she never worked on Saturdays. Or maybe he knew all along and he was just letting her go. How kind of him. With every passing day, she was coming to hate him more and more. She wished she'd never invited him here. She wished she'd never reached out and become friends with him. No. She wished she'd never even met him. And now she was stuck with him. Chapter 7, Pushed to the Limit. Chapter text. The patients at Mara's were startled when the door flung open with a loud bang. They barely had time for their heart rates to slow before a Cliff Smedley was wheeled in on a stretcher, family and friends following close behind. Stay back. Mara was saying, her hand outstretched. I can't get a good look at him when you crowd around me like this. What's wrong with him? Blurted out the boy's mother, Thalia. Cliff let out a low groan and shifted slightly on the stretcher. Listen to me, Mara said, sauntering over to Thalia as Finn and Eric helped lift Cliff onto a bed. I need you to calm down, Thalia. Panic won't help him. Is he going to be okay? Just calm down. Take some deep breaths. Mara put out her arms in a placating gesture. Vernon, please. Vernon Smedley put his arms around his wife and stroked her hair. This seemed to have a calming effect on Thalia, who seemed to melt in his embrace, tears falling silently down her face. Hiccup, I need you for a second. Mara beckoned to the hooligan chief and opened the door to a back room. Inga, keep him stable, okay? Okay. Inga replied, putting some cloths on Cliff's forehead. Hiccup found himself shoved into the empty room. Mara shut the door a bit too loudly behind her. Do you know who would want to poison Cliff? She asked solemnly once the noise of outside was safely blocked out. Hiccup felt his stomach clench. Poison? No. Mara pulled out a small vial of liquid from a nearby drawer. Ipcac, she said simply, placing it into Hiccup's hand. It's meant to induce vomiting. In small doses, it's harmless, but that amount in Cliff's drink. Hiccup held up the liquid. So why put it in? Not your conventional poison. It's not even poison, really. I suppose an overdose could be dangerous, but Cliff seems to have expelled it, thank Thor. Mara said with a sigh of relief. He should be okay. So why are you asking me this? Because I don't want to put Burke on alert. Mara replied. This could be an accident. Perhaps it got in there by mistake. I don't know, but if it was deliberate, that means one of us did it. Someone from Burke. Unless there have been foreign visitors. Hiccup tensed, thinking of Roscoe, but quickly pushed the thought from his mind. There were, but they never went near the Great Hall. Far as I know, they left before lunch. Then it was one of us. Mara said darkly. Do you want to go public with the information? No, said Hiccup. Not yet. Like you said, we want to wait and see. I'll tell the council and Cliff's parents and friends, but I think we need to keep this secret for now. If we start pointing fingers, we could cause a riot and no one wants that. Not after. He stopped himself from mentioning the events of 2 years previous. Mara seemed to understand what he had almost said. All right. Let me go care for my patient. If you don't mind, could you clear out the space? I want to give him some air and he can't get that with people pressing in on him. Of course. Hiccup said with a small smile, mostly relieved that Cliff would recover. They exited the room and were instantly bombarded with questions. Later, said Mara firmly. Now I want the teens to step out. Vernon, Thalia, come with me. But Mara. Yes, Eric. I mean you too. Hiccup will update you. Mara beckoned toward Cliff's parents and the three of them entered the curtained-off area, from which they could still hear the occasional groan. "What's wrong with him?" Eric immediately asked Hiccup. "Outside." Hiccup pointed to the door, eyeing the other patients, who seemed to be listening with interest. Finn, Inga, Helga, and Eric nearly threw themselves outside in their haste. Hiccup carefully closed the door and beckoned them toward the woods. He didn't want them to be overheard, and the last thing Burke needed was widespread panic. Astrid, who was running down the hill to the healers, gave him an inquisitive look and he jerked his head in the direction he was leading the teens. "Okay, we're alone," Finn said once Hiccup had led them far enough into the woods that they wouldn't be overheard. "What's wrong with Cliff?" "Poison," Hiccup replied simply. "It's not deadly and he'll recover, but I need to ask you all if you have seen anything suspicious." "Anything at all?" "You don't think, not one of us?" Eric looked around at his friends, his eyes wide. "We'd never." "I'm not asking if it was one of you," Hiccup clarified. "I'm asking if you can think of anyone who would poison Cliff. Anyone with a grudge against him." Astrid and the teens were silent for a moment. Eric furrowed his brow in concentration. "No one," Inga said finally. "He's one of the nicest people I know." "A little annoying maybe," Helga added. "But not enough that anyone would want to kill him. I don't think he had any enemies like that," Finn finished. "Eric, you're his best friend." Eric sighed deeply and shook his head. "I can't think of anyone would want to target him, Hiccup. Not like that. He never gets into fights and he usually stops if someone tells him to. Honestly, I have no idea who could have done this." Hiccup's heart sank. He trusted Eric. Heck, he trusted all of them completely. If they didn't know who had done it, maybe it was an accident. "You can go, guys," he said after a long pause. "Thanks. Just don't crowd him, all right?" "Got it." Eric nodded. As the teens traipsed away, all looking slightly downtrodden, Astrid turned to her husband with a worried expression. "You don't think this was an accident, do you?" she asked in a low voice so the teens wouldn't hear. Hiccup shook his head. "Ipcac isn't the kind of thing you put in someone's cup by mistake. I could understand if he ingested soap by mistake, but how do you accidentally drug someone?" Eric couldn't believe just how horribly this day was going. He didn't know what he did to be punished by the gods so cruelly, but he simply didn't understand it. First, Adriana had to crush his heart and soul without any explanation. Then some jerk had to poison his best friend. He was sure jolly good fun times were just around the corner. He tried to ignore his pessimistic thoughts, but he'd been through a lot in his 18 years of life. Both his father's and sister's unexpected deaths had taken a toll on his formerly optimistic nature. Months of self-loathing had nearly shredded his self-esteem as much as the blade had against his flesh. It seemed when bad things happened, they could only get worse from then on. Through the next few hours he tagged along with Finn and another boy, Thorin, trying to occupy themselves while they waited for word on Cliff. Eric only half listened as the two boys discussed various things like dragon racing skills and girl talk. He was finding it difficult to concentrate. Small talk was never his thing after all. He always liked the deeper content. Eric focused on Thorin as he spoke. The sociable teenager always seemed to be smirking about something, whether he was getting himself into mischief or flirting with the girls. Between all the boys, Thorin was probably the ladies' man out of the lot. From speaking to Adriana in the past few months, Eric had discovered that the girls considered Eric the big brother type anyone could get advice from. Finn was the rugged, hot one with the glory and esteemed future, and Thorin was the handsome, likable, easy-to-talk-to guy who could get along with anybody. Then there was Cliff, who was a category of man in his own complete way. Eric's heart panged sadly. He wished he could be with his friend. "You're off your rocker," Finn snorted in response to something Thorin had said. "Oh please," the brown-haired boy scoffed. "Like you wouldn't go for her if the opportunity arose." Finn shrugged. "I mean, she's nice and all, but she's not really my type. Besides, I don't try on every sock until I find the right fit." "Ouch," Thorin snickered, seemingly unoffended. "What about you, Larson? You've dated her. Got any advice for me?" Huh? Eric asked in surprise. He thought quickly. Oh, Taryn. Yeah, weren't you listening? Sorry, my mind's on more than just girls. Thorin gasped, a hand on his chest. Geez, 242. You two are a hard case. No, but seriously, would Taryn go out with me? Eric made a face and shrugged. Taryn knows what she wants and, more specifically, what she doesn't want. If you want to know, I'd ask her if I was you. Everything's cool between you two. Yup. Eric nodded, feeling rather bland and neutral about the conversation. Intriguing advice there. Finn smirked. Eric rolled his eyes. Not really in the mood for dishing out dating advice right now, fellas. I've got my own girl problems to deal with. Oh drama. Thorin bounced on the balls of his feet excitedly. Do tell. Now that's okay. Oh come on. You can't say stuff like that and not spill the beans. Finn held up a finger. Bad things happen when you spill the beans. Thorin rolled his eyes. That's fresh, coming from you, fearless Finn. That got Eric to smile, at least a little bit. He shook his head and decided it was time to make his exit before they made him unload his baggage. I'm going to go take a walk. He turned toward the forest line nearby. I'll catch you guys later. But you still have to teach us all your wise dating advice. Thorin called after him. Eric turned with his hands akimbo. Thorin, the girls flock around you as if you're Thor himself. Even more than they do for Finn. What do you need me for? Thorin smirked. One should never stop learning. Eric rolled his eyes. Yes, because all my dating experiences have just been flawless. Exactly why we want to hear your advice. You're the most successful failure here. Finn grinned. Eric frowned, fighting a smile. He knew they meant it as a joke, so he shouldn't be hypersensitive. But in light of his most recent failures and Adriana's decision to ditch him for Brandine, he rolled his eyes and turned away, leaving them cackling in the street. Make your own mistakes. But I would much rather learn from yours. It's easier that way. No, thank you. At least tell me what Taryn's favorite flower is. Bye, Thorin. Eric quickly marched into the woods, ignoring the two boys' laughter until finally the serene atmosphere of the forest enveloped him. He slowed to a walk and sighed, trying to sort out his thoughts. Adriana. Brandine. Cliff. None of it made sense. He didn't know why Adriana had so suddenly cut him off, like they had nothing. He knew there was something there, and the way she'd kissed him back she had to know it too. So what reason would she have to cut ties? If she just wanted to be faithful to her boyfriend, that would be fine. If she wanted time to work things out with him and decide who she wanted to be with, that would be totally fine. Any explanation would have been nice, regardless of what said explanation could be. But he'd gotten none. Maybe when she told Brandine about the kiss, he'd gotten mad. Maybe. Eric stopped in his tracks. Maybe Brandine had told her to stop talking to him. But that would be ridiculous, right? He wasn't her husband, so he didn't hold any jurisdiction over her. She didn't have to do what he said. Was he just being a control freak? Or did he really care about Adriana so much that nothing would get between them, including her childhood best friend? He'd never considered himself a threat before. But suddenly everything became clearer in the grand scheme of things. He and Brandine had always held a general dislike for each other. Eric could never decide if Adriana was the reason or just no chemistry to create a general friendship. No similarities, shared hobbies, or common interests. Except Adriana. Eric growled and kicked a loose pebble into the nearby bushes. He hated feeling like a vulture fighting another vulture for a piece of meat. He didn't want to fight over her like that. She wasn't a prize to be won, she was a person, an amazing, smart, beautiful young woman who they both cared about. Why couldn't they put their differences aside and learn to get along for her sake, and let her decide how to make her next move? However, over the last year, Brandine had been getting increasingly more dominant when it came to his girlfriend or group activities. He didn't seem to come across as abusive, but little by little things began to bother Eric. Most of the time it was subtle, but the little glint in the guy's eye whenever he saw Eric looking like he was the king of the universe with his prize, was enough to make Eric want to punch him in the face. So what if Brandine had gotten really upset that Eric had kissed her, and Adriana had kissed him back, and he'd forcefully told her to stop talking to him? If that was the case, it would explain the lack of explanation. But why the fear? Eric knew when she was afraid. He could identify it in every subtle facial expression. Eric's thoughts drifted to Cliff, and a sudden thought occurred to him. What if Brandine had poisoned Cliff? The thought was absurd at first. Why would he have any reason to hurt Cliff, who was basically harmless? Sure, he talked a lot and he could drive